Hello, everyone, and welcome to Phoenix Gaming. I'm Nick Henning, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We are still running through the World Series of Board Gaming tournaments. This one we're doing is the Dominant Species Final, which is the first game actually that I won at the World Series of Board Gaming. So you're going to know the spoiler for this in advance. And the reason this one's different is, of course, because I'm myself playing in this game, and so I'm going to be giving you a little bit more of perspective of my personal thought process and kind of still talking through the game a little bit generally. I also know that Dominant Species Marine is not necessarily the game that most people know or are familiar with in this tournament. That being said, I do think that this game is singularly the most exciting game that I played at the WSBG. There are some moments in this game that are just really climactic and very powerful, starting right from the beginning of the game. It is a longer game. It does have some kind of thinking in it. And to that point, because it is a longer game, there's a good chance that I'm going to be doing a costume change in the middle of this. I'm probably going to record this in two pieces just because I only have so much stamina. It's going to be a little bit over 3 hours, and we'll see how we can get through that. But it is pretty exciting. I do think that there's a lot going on in this game, and I have a lot of thoughts to share about it. A lot of dynamic options between the players, and I'm excited to go through it. So let's have a crack at it. We're going to start off with me joining the table, and the chyrons here are not going to be accurate to where we're sitting until we actually set up at the table. So ignore the Edward, Nick, Isaac, Michael thing for now. But the players are as follows. There's Michael, who's the gentleman wearing the hat with the beard. There's Isaac, who is in the red. Then there is Edward, who is in the corn shirt. And then myself, I'm the gentleman wearing the mask. The four of us draft in Michael, Isaac, myself, and then Edward order. Now, drafting is something that's unique to the WSBG. This is not something that's in the rule book. And what they essentially said was we're going to flip out 6 traits. And of course, there's the 4 animals. So when you draft first, so Michael had the choice of taking either an animal or a trait. And Michael chose the trait camouflage, which I'll read to you just so you have an exact text of it. At the end of each Wanderlust or Tectonics action by an opponent, you may put 1 new species from your gene pool onto the newly placed tile. So that's a pretty powerful because it's a nice way to get your people spread out all over the board. But the difficult thing is your people need to live. And so that's an evolution card. They call it evolution cards? I'm so bad with actual names. Trait cards. That's a trait card that really is going to incentivize Michael to make sure he can eat as many different kinds of foods that other players can as possible. Isaac, who went second, took the Ram Feeder card. Ram Feeder just makes him better at eating fish. Better at eating plankton, the blue thing that the fish normally eat in the game. And then I'm third pick here, and I'm spending a lot of time. I spend a lot more time than any of the players thinking about what I'm drafting. And that's because I've played this game a couple times. I played a couple times by myself. I played a couple times with the drafting, and I found that the initial layout, the initial play, the initial lap 4 tokens, or hopefully 4 tokens that you'll place, is one of the most impactful things that can determine how this game goes for you. That's not to say that you can't come back, but it's a game that right from the beginning, what you do matters. And so while I'm sitting here, I'm thinking about a lot of stuff. And right off the bat, the evolution cards, which are the cards on the right side, we flipped, are some absolutely insane cards. I'm going to start off with the card that's the very top, Population Explosion. Population Explosion says, select a tile, place X species where X is the number of all species already present. Now, if you notice, we start with 12 tokens right in the middle, right? 3 for each player. So right off the bat, I noticed that, and I think, geez, whoever is going to get to dominate first is going to be able to snap up that card and drop a lot of cubes on board. That second card is also pretty good. It's not good at this stage in the game, but it's generally a very good card. Let me make sure I get the right name for it. But it's Predators, which lets you eliminate 1 opposing species on each tile you occupy. So later in the game, when you're spread out, you can just knock people out of tiles. It's a really powerful card, but not right now. And then the other card that's really, really scary, and I've seen this come up in game and game again, and came up in my semifinals of this game, is this card called Trophic Cascade. That's the third card there, and Trophic Cascade is absolutely bonkers. It says select a tile, remove X elements from that tile where X equals the slot this card occupies. That means that you can just wipe out food for other players at the beginning of the game, and I've seen this just completely put other players on the back foot. Finally, the fifth card there is Solar Radiation, which as long as that card is in play, evolution scoring is halved. So there's a lot of really high impact evolution cards right at the beginning of the game here. And I decided to make a pretty greedy play. I know that I'm going to draft animals second. And generally, my impression is that folks much prefer playing the reptiles. They don't mind being later in the turn order, but they do like winning those ties. And so I, at a time, thought that Edward was going to take reptiles as a starting piece there. And I was wrong. He ends up taking crustaceans, which is really unfortunate for me because I took Cannibal as my trade card. Cannibal is a trade card that says anytime you have a species die, you score 1 point. It's pretty innocuous, and I don't think that it's very good on first blush. And then I surprised myself in a game that I practiced at how powerful I really thought it was. And it's not because you score a point for everyone that dies. It's because it says score a point if someone dies and mind control the other players. People are really disincentivized to give you points, and they will let you live in situations where maybe they shouldn't because they're wary of giving you points. So I snap up that Cannibal card. And then Edward says, great, I'll take Flight. Flight is a wonderful trade card, and it was the other one that I had considered that gives you a lot of flexibility in where you're placing. You're placing above or below your pawn, whereas normally you can just place strictly below where your last pawn is. And then he grabs crustaceans, which really surprised me. The crustaceans have the advantage of going first. I wanted the crustaceans because I had this whole plan around cannibalism that I was going to population explode, put a ton of people in play, and then mind control people never to kill me because I had so many pieces in play, but I'd score points for doing that. Ultimately, what I end up doing is I end up taking the fishes so that I can hope to execute this same plan anyway. I'm hoping that Edward doesn't notice kind of this path that I'm planning on with this population explosion plan. And I take fishes kind of with the plan of doing exactly that. Isaac takes the opportunity to grab reptiles. The other reason I take fishes, by the way, is that Isaac with Ram Feeder, really nice combo with fishes because that's going to be a triple scorer when he takes the dominate action on Plankton. And I didn't love the idea of giving that to another player. That being said, I also didn't love the idea of another player competing with me for Plankton, but I really wanted to execute this population explosion strategy. I thought it was going to be pretty explosive at the beginning of the game, and Michael ends up getting stuck here on cephalopods at the end. Now, I'll say in a vacuum, cephalopods is actually one of my favorites. They win most ties, not against reptiles, but knowing one player that beats you on ties is really not that big of a deal. Crustaceans are really interesting. Going first is more powerful than I think people give it credit for. However, losing ties to everyone is tough. So you really need to come out of the gates strong. You need to be far ahead of the other players late in the game, or it's going to be a lot tougher for you. And obviously that's in descending order for all the players. Reptiles kind of are going to have a weaker start of the game, but by the time they get to the end of the game, they have a lot more latitude in where their pieces are, and where they get to do their moves at the end of the game is just more powerful than every other species because they win all ties. So that's kind of the thinking with the draft here. I think there can be some kind of wild stuff that happens with evolution. Solar Radiation also is one of those cards I've seen just stick around forever. Players are not usually motivated to take it themselves because it's not that good, and actually you can kind of shoot yourself in the foot depending on how you're set up with it. So people don't want to take it, which means that half scoring thing is going to last for a long while. And Edward's going to start here by speciating, which is, I think a lot of players start off this game with abundance or with adaptation, and those things make sense because this game looks like and feels like the kind of game where you want to kind of like, quote unquote, build your engine or build your system or get yourself ready and to go there. And I actually think this game is about scoring points. You really always need to have your eyes on how you score points, and by speciating, you give yourself more locations in which you can score points at. Now, one thing I didn't talk about in the setup that's really important, it's a little bit hard to see, but if you look at the evolution track, I can't really identify it, but it's on the left side of the board. We're looking at it upside down. So if you're looking at the text upside down from the top, the very top of it, upside down, is retrieve, then domination, then evolution. So second to bottom if you're looking at it the right way, third from top if you're looking at it the wrong way here. And there's 5 tokens there, and they are land, seamount, seagrass, and sand. And those indicate which things can score until we do the next reseed. So land tiles are more important than they normally would be in the game. They all score the most points, and they allow you to trigger only the lowest cards on the evolution track on the right there. Whereas, if someone scored sand's going to score the least points of those locations that I just listed, but you can trigger any of the cards on the right side of the board there. So seeing Edward speciate, I'm wondering, is he going to take a sand domination? But it doesn't really matter to me. I'm going to stay the plan, which is that I'm going to speciate out of green here. The reason I'm doing that, even though it only makes a couple fish, is because I'm going to put fish into that land zone. And that land zone is going to allow me to trigger population explosion, which is the whole plan that I have at the beginning of the game here. And then right off the bat, Michael does something that I completely did not expect. He's going to think about it for a few moments. I think what he does is he has the same idea that I do. He's also noticing the population explosion here. Unfortunately for him, there's no sun to speciate out of. And I just took the one thing that allowed you to speciate into land. You can see him reading the cards right there, right? He's looking at what can be triggered there by evolution. And I'll tell you, I think every player at this table recognized that the most important thing you can do in dominant species marine is score. And that sounds so dumb. I know it really does. Because in every game, your goal is to score. But in a lot of Euro games, they will give you points for just doing the thing. And this game says, no, you need to elect the actions that score points for you in this game. And there's very specific actions that score points. And Michael says, you know what? I don't like this land plan that you're on. So he goes ahead and he moves his species out to the grass and to the land so that he can give himself options for early evolution actions. Woof. Not a great start for Nicholas. We wanted to score that land, even though it's half scoring because of the solar radiation, we'd still score 4 points for it, just with no one else contesting us, and get to trigger our population explosion. Hated seeing this happen. Really, really unfortunate start for us. And I think also not very good for Michael. I see why he's doing it, but also his species can't eat in those areas. They can eat in the seagrass there, but they can't eat in the land. And we're going to see how that goes out for him. Issac takes what I think is one of the other kind of standard starter moves, which is to put food that you can eat with the abundance action, so he can eat sun, up by thermal vents up there. Sometimes I see them put them down in the ocean vents because you get to place a lot more species, but you score a lot more points on land, and on this board especially, land is better, so it makes a lot of sense to me that that's what he ends up doing here. Edward then exploits his flight power to go up to adaptation and take sun, so he can now take advantage essentially of the fact that Issac has expanded out to the north there. Part of the reason I think this is so powerful is every player who plays this game understands how powerful the vents can really be. If you have control of that survival card, which says, I want you to have the most cubes on vents across the board, then you will have triangular scoring every time a fish card is going to get revealed from the domination deck. And that's gnarly. That's very, very powerful. I decide then I'm going to get a little greedy here because Michael's kind of blown up my plan a little bit. And the greed is this. I see that Michael can't trigger the land there. So I go ahead and I make population. I make extra fish out of the location there because it puts more people into the middle for population explosion and creates a ton of people in the seamount. So now I can trigger seamount and puts just a bunch of people in the ocean that are helpful for expanding out later. Seamount's in that third slot, so I'm thinking to myself, if Michael does something where he triggers grassland and takes the population explosion, he sees that play, I'll take trophic cascades and I'll remove food from the appropriate player, whatever the circumstances might be, which honestly might be Michael, because he's going to have a ton of things thanks to the population explosion. Michael then basically says, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do the population explosion plan, but he makes what I think is a pretty fundamental, crucial, how about that? A pretty crucial rules mistake here. I don't want to spoil it for when he goes there, but I'll start talking about it because it's going to come up in a second. You'll see my hand come out to actually block it very awkwardly. When you take the evolution action, you can score points, but if you don't eat any food there, which is called thriving, if you don't thrive, then you're not able to take a card. So he goes ahead and he scores evolution for land. There's my block. And he'll score 4 and I'll score 2 because it's halved again, thanks to the solar radiation. But here I am pointing out to him, and the GM's going to look it up and read him the paragraph in the rules where, nope, you're actually not allowed to take a card off the board if you're not thriving, which sucks for Michael. That's for sure his plan. He saw exactly the same avenue that I did. And I was less worried about him triggering it because I kind of figured, him taking that grassland there doesn't feel quite as good, the 2 points, and then he has a bunch of options, so maybe he's thinking he's going to go trophic cascades and remove the food. I think in retrospect, seeing how this all played out, what I really should have done was not speciate. What I really should have done is I should have jumped down to the land, and I should have population explosion the turn before. I got a little bit greedy. I thought that Michael had made a mistake on his first turn by moving out. I saw that he likely didn't notice that land was not a place that he could eat in, and I thought that he might walk into this trap here by accident. And even still, I think that I should have dropped to the bottom for a couple of reasons. I kind of put myself in a position here where I am now in danger for multiple reasons. And you'll see that play out in just a second. But I got really greedy and I let myself go there. And unfortunately, that puts Michael really on the back foot at the beginning of this game, because he's essentially taken, a move action and a scoring action that more or less are kind of duds for him. That's not a great place for him to be. And Issac is very content to easily take the speciation around that plankton there, which he can eat thanks to his bottom feeder or ram feeder card, and drop a bunch of reptiles in play, which is amazing for him, right? Because again, he wins ties, so he's in good shape in all those places. That's a little unfortunate for me because I wanted to score Seamount and just kind of score it uncontested. That was actually another reason why I made babies out of plankton, because I figured, I can just trigger the mount space and I'll score myself rather than giving this other player points for scoring in land. And Issac kind of ruins that plan for me very appropriately. Edward is the crustaceans, then drops all the way to the bottom. He takes that extra action token right off the bat out of pink, or the worms there, whatever you want to call them. And he gets sort of the default 2 times 3 spaces that he's in for 6 points there. That'll be 6 points at the end of the game. And then I execute the population explosion plan. Now, I hadn't really counted out what was going to happen if other players expanded, but the reality here is that I end up picking up all my cubes and putting literally every single one of them in play. And I'm so excited by this play that I kind of neglect to see the danger that I put myself in. And I'd mentioned at the beginning of the game, I was very aware of the danger of trophic cascades. You can remove food from other players. But I said, well, Issac eats plankton, so I'm not worried about him. And Edward eats grass, so I'm not worried about him. They're not going to remove their own food. They're not going to cut off their nose to spite their own face. And for some reason, I had convinced myself that Michael was going to recall here, that he had realized he had put himself really tragically on the back foot. Everyone else was developing a game plan while he had basically nothing going on. And he is going to recall. I kind of saw him as having no options at this point. I mean, Domination is not really viable for him. He doesn't have enough spaces for domination to work. And for some reason, I just totally whiffed on the fact that he can do exactly what he does here, which is dominate grasslands. And then he can go all the way up to the 4th spot. He's got a couple options there, but he's going to go ahead and take Trophic Cascades. And he does not like the play that I just made. Sees it as a threat, appropriately so, because putting all of your cubes into play on round 3 is patently insane, absolutely ridiculous. Normally you'll go through an entire course of this game and maybe get all your tokens out. Having them all in play at this stage is just bonkers. So he's scared of that, and he removes both of my food tokens. He's going to take the blue and the green tokens away there. And I watched this video, and I'm really glad to see how sort of calm and normal I look, because underneath, I realize at this moment how deeply and badly I had fucked up. I was so excited about this really powerful play in the final. I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna put myself so far ahead. He just flips that card right there, and we're moving on. People are fine. That card flip right there, if it flips in the bottom left corner, a skeleton bone picture, which is about 1/6 of the deck, although 2 of them are already out from the initial flop, so a little bit less than 1/6 of the deck, every single one of my pieces on the board dies, and permanently. And I would have, at the end of round 3 here, been done. Like, I literally am there right now thinking about, are they going to allow me to shake everyone's hand and walk away from this table? Because I don't know that I want to sit here for another 3 hours having just killed myself. And I'd score 31 points thanks to my cannibal card, and that would be my entire score for the game, basically. The fear in this moment is, what are the other players going to do? I think part of the reason I didn't think about what Michael was going to do here is that I don't tend to play games like this, and I don't tend to play games with players who are very aggressive. And Michael's play is not that good for him. It's just really, really bad for me. And Michael is falling further and further behind Isaac and Edward as they're developing their boards. And he says, you know what, I'm going to take this opportunity to just completely hose this one player. Isaac and Edward, if they play like that, and that's what I'm thinking in this moment, if they are also thinking that, I'm so dead. I'm so dead. Now, fortunately for me, Edward doesn't really have the same choices. Even though he has flight, he's kind of got his pieces all over the board. Isaac, however, is content to just kind of slowly expand outwards. He takes the move 3 and he moves into the land so that when Michael or I recall, he can just kind of trigger some things off the board himself. Edward takes the free Wanderlust action. Now, I call it free because when you use a white token to take that action, you get to take another turn. So it's often really, really nice to take that action and then take another, or take that action and then recall. And when you place, you get triangular scoring, 1, 3, 6, 10, based on the number of similar adjacent things. So he plays that seamount. That's one tile, but it's next to the other seamount, even though it looks like they're all the same color. Notice that those seamounts are like a darker blue and the oceans are like a azure blue. I don't know. The seamounts, there's 2 of them, so those are worth 3 points. So I'll score 3 points for that. And much grace for me, because he puts out food that he can eat. Well, food that he can eat, the green, is food that I can eat. When I see that, I have this moment of relief, huge breath of air. Isaac's the first that can move in, right? Because when you Wanderlust, any player can move in. And I take every one of these cubes and they run for their lives. At this point, I'm breathing a little bit safer because at least I won't get completely knocked out of the game. There is a card that allows you to get people back from the dead, half your people back from the dead. So I'm already thinking about the fact that I really hope that card is in this game, because not all of the evolution cards come out every game. But I'm still in trouble. That big pile in the middle is still in complete danger. And I want to be greedy here, right? Like, I want to score that seamount. It's my next action. I have the most people in that space, but none of these tiles are going to save me. And so rather than scoring those couple points and taking an evolution card that isn't going to save me or score me a couple points, I immediately, well, not immediately, apparently. Apparently I thought about it for a second. But I'm going to go ahead and recall here. And I'm going to recall because what I need to do is I need to get food back on the board. Or I need to learn how to eat food, right? I need those abundance or adaptation actions that I skipped at the beginning of the game. And I think a lot of players would look at this and be like, of course you're supposed to take abundance and adaptation at the beginning of the game. And I actually am completely content with my play, except for the fact that I exposed myself in that way. I should have rushed it a little bit harder, or I should have taken Trophic Cascades defensively and then done population explosion or something like that. Here I go reclaiming. I reclaim with only 3 tokens. You could see Michael's upset. He's hoping that I'm going to do something else because he wants his work to pay off. However, we've gone around the board and Issac and Edward have shown, you know what? I'm playing for first place. I'm not playing to put Nick in 4th place. And that is a dynamic that I think is really interesting and part of the reason that I like playing 4-player games. I don't like playing a lot of 2-player games. I like the dynamics of what you need to do to win, and just stuffing someone is often not enough. Michael's going to reclaim his tokens here as well. In his case, it's because he just has no viable actions left because he's had a very weak first round, and I think it's I'm very confident in saying that Michael is losing the game at this point in time. Issac goes ahead and does domination action. Again, very kind of like fundamental start for him and Edward here, scoring a couple points, getting, a little bit of either abundance or adaptation into play, putting some extra species in play. Like they both have like your fundamental start game, like get an extra token, right? In Edward's case, it's an adaptation. In Issac's case, it's an abundance. Speciate. Do something else. In Edward's case, it's, Wanderlust and score, and in Issac's case, it's spread out, and then both of them dominate to get that extra action tile at the beginning, because that extra action disc, that cylinder, or whatever you want to call it, gives them extra options, and powerful extra options. Edward then goes ahead and he uses his white token to speciate out of that sun to grab those lucrative areas up top, right? He grabs those sand spaces. He grabs that vent space. He completely takes advantage of essentially Issac's work that he set up here by drafting off of what he does. And now he says, I'm in charge now. I can score all these points and there's nothing anyone else can do about it. So he's really cleverly maneuvered himself into a position here. And I breathe a gigantic sigh of relief. You saw how quickly I took my turn. If you're watching the board and not my face talking, I slammed my token down on abundance there, and I put a plankton back into play. And all of a sudden, I go from almost certainly being knocked out of this game right at the beginning to probably winning. Having all of your tokens in play is really, really good at this point in time. It's just a lot of actions I'm not going to have to take. Michael's going to do the same kind of thing. He's going to put some snails out there. He needs them as well. If extinction came out, those 2 tokens on the land would be dying because of, again, what I think was a mistake at the beginning of the game, of him expanding there. And so he snap takes that option. Issac's now thinking about what he's going to do with his free white token. He's got a bunch of options, but I think usually the default when you're not sure is to throw it on Wanderlust, score a couple free points, and then use your extra turn to reclaim all of your tiles. That being said, he can do absolutely anything he wants to. If he wants to start adapting a little bit, and I'm getting a little bit of glare on those tokens, so I can't quite see what the adaptations are, and don't think any of them are suns, which would be the most exciting for him, but I think one of them is a yellow, which would be good for him. But he's going to go ahead and do exactly what I said, that Wanderlust action that's going to score a couple points. That's a pretty good one too with that seagrass there, because he's going to score 3 by putting it next to that other seagrass, and he's really the only player that's adjacent to all that stuff. Further, I'm not there, and plankton is good for me, but I have no one that can eat it. So he says, you know what, I'm going to use my ram feeder ability, and I'm going to take advantage. I'm going to claim my own little tile by myself out here, and I love seeing that, because now when someone explores into that space between the seamounts, there's plankton there for me to eat. That's wonderful for me. I actually think to that point, Issac maybe would have wanted to play that plankton in between those 2 seagrass areas. I think that might have been a better choice for him, just because it gives me more options down there. That being said, it also gives him more options, so it's a little hard to say for sure where that piece should be. It's also important to note that, like, speciation, 2 of those things are plankton speciations. That's another reason why I took fishes at the beginning, is a lot of ways for the fish to just sort of like expand out of the places they can eat at the beginning, and that's usually very, very powerful to start off with. Issac then goes ahead and reclaims all of his tokens. And Edward's going to start his turn. Okay. I feel like I'm out of breath already because there was a lot that happened in those first 4 rounds of this game. Kind of really, to me, is like one of the most dramatic first 4 rounds of a game of anything that I've ever played. But obviously for me, that's very much because I was in the driver's seat and nothing actually happened. Like, the drama wasn't there in terms of like an actual explosion, but the except for population wise, but the actual the tension was ratcheted so high. Like, look at my body language right now. I'm like so tense and just like trying to let go of the terror I have in this moment. They're going through the reseed here, and this is pretty common that the early reseed is fast, right? Everyone's going to have 4, maybe 5 actions. In this game, actually, both Nick and Michael, the fishes and the cephalopods, only took 3 actions before we recalled. So we were really just waiting for Issac to finish up his round, and he and Edward both took Wanderlust, which just accelerated a little bit more. From this point going forward, though, reseeds really tend to slow down quite a lot, depending on what folks have in terms of their action tokens and everything like that. It's going to happen a few more times in the game, but this is the kind of thing that players think happens like a bunch in the game. And in my experience, only ends up happening, I don't know, 4 or 5 times, something like that. It's not obvious that that's the case. It feels like there's going to be a lot more reseed events than there really are, but because your reseed event is triggered off of the slowest player, you personally might be recalling and placing, but usually someone out there is playing a really long, slow game where they're playing all their tokens and they're getting extra tokens, and by tokens I mean cylinders, and then they're going to place those cylinders again, and maybe they'll get bounced out, and it can end up actually being, the rounds can be pretty long. And so what happens is these 5 tiles that are being placed right now about evolution, they're really going to change the texture of the game over the next several rounds. Like, what is it that folks are going to be paying attention to? And let's see if I can read this correctly. I think those first 2 are land tiles again, which is insane for Edward because he is easily in charge of the land tiles. It's not bad for Issac either because he's at least winning the tie there. Really bad for me. I'm in dead last on all land tiles. The next one, though, Mount, the 3rd space one, that's a really good one for me. Also good for Issac based on the current board's position. Sand, good for Edward. And then the last one, Ocean, good for, ironically, the reptiles right now. That's not very common. Usually it's the fishes or the crustaceans that take advantage of that at the beginning. So we'll see how that develops. The other thing to look at is, what does the speciation look like? And we see blues, browns, pinks. Generally good for the players that eat those things. And then the other thing to look at is adaptation. Because some food's been removed from the board, there's just a little bit more need for diversity when food hasn't been removed from the board. That are those little discs, those little circles in the middle of the board, when they haven't been removed, you can usually get away with what you have at the beginning and you just sort of like develop out what you yourself can eat. But if some things start getting removed, then all of a sudden you're in a position where, like, oh, if someone removes that one tile, like, I suddenly starve to death. I gotta do something about this. Edward goes ahead, he bounces all the way down, again just taking advantage of his flight ability that he can go anywhere, and he goes to that second land tile, scores himself 8 divided by 2 because of the slow radiation, 4 points, and then he scores a huge amount of points off of what is this card called? Monotypic habitat. And so he scores triangular scoring for places that he's alone on. He's alone in 4 spaces, so he scores 10 points and shoots himself into the lead at 17 there. I think Edward is easily the point leader at this point in time, and if there's someone that isn't winning right now, that's me, it's him. for sure. I then jump down and I grab the sun off the board because there are 2 sun tiles in play and they're in those juicy spots. So I give myself options to eat sun. And you can see Michael there is commenting because that was exactly the move he was going to do. He and I seem to be on the exact same brain wavelength, which makes me even happier that I drafted fishes at the beginning because being in front of him in turn order has saved my butt a couple times now. So Michael, I think, is also interested in doing an adaptation here. They're not as good for him. And part of the problem is that those, I can't quite see with the glare, but those regression tokens, I think, are matching the adaptation tokens. I think there's a pink or worm, whatever you want to call it, in both the regression and adaptation box. And generally, if there's something in the regression box and the adaptation box, you're not going to take it because essentially you have to spend 2 actions if you want to take and keep that piece. So unless it's like right at the end of the game, you're not going to go for it. And so I think the only one there is, I must be wrong about the pink and the regression tile there. I can't quite tell by the color. Or, maybe Michael didn't see it and then he needs to go take a regression action to prevent himself from losing that pink token. Pink is, however, a nice option here for him in that it opens up a side of the board that his pieces can't necessarily get to as well. And pink is one of the speciation places, so he can drop his oranges around there and start getting that board presence, which he has basically none of right now. Issac goes ahead and takes the expansion action. This is a cool choice for him because Seagrass Meadow there is going to be 6 points, which is really nice. And I think those are maybe some sun pieces. Yeah, he loves seeing sun on Wanderlust. Getting more sun on the board is just wonderful for him as the reptiles. It's unfortunate that he doesn't have more pieces over there because now, the Wanderlust action is not that great in terms of his pieces actually moving into new areas. That being said, I do think he should move. He probably should have moved one of his pieces out there. Maybe the one, because the other ones, those 2 purple pieces that are in the other seagrass meadows are in places that could maybe speciate. And so we'll see if he ends up moving out there. Michael, I think, is not incentivized to move out there because he's going to die. If he does, he's going to go extinct, but he might take his special ability to just put his free guy into play. And he does exactly that. If he dies, it's not that big a deal. Losing a piece here and there is not that big a deal. And it's possible that he'll find some way to solve for that, or we just won't draw an extinction card. No ominous spoilers there or anything. All right, and here we see Edward, again, really taking advantage of his flight power. And you're going to see this time and time in this game. Edward is very, very focused on scoring points above all else, which is, as I said right at the beginning of this conversation, I think one of the things that sets players apart in this game, knowing that scoring points is the point of this game, fundamentally, I think, separates the wheat from the chaff, as it were. It's a great token for him because he gets to put another pink into play. He's the, that's Michael loves seeing that, right? Another, because he just picked that up. But it's amazing for Edward, right? Who is the kind of primary consumer of those pink tokens. Michael's happy to put his freebie out there. Issac is happy to throw, kind of spread his purple guys out. I'm happy to see space because there's a lot of my pieces that need to be split up. Having a pile of fish in the same area, a pile of species, a pile of cubes in the same area is not powerful, right? But me being able to kind of split up like that suddenly is very good. So really everybody benefits from this. And this is, I think, one of the things about Edward's play, and we'll see this time and time again, that I think is very interesting. He doesn't care if it's good for other people. He cares if he scores points for it now. And that's going to be his priority in this moment. And I don't know if that's the right or wrong call. I think in the long run, it's dangerous, right? Like if the game ended right now, I'd score 5 points for that. Well, let's ignore the fact that everything is halved right now. But if the game ended right now, I score 5 points for that, Michael scores 3, and Isaac scores 2. And if that's the case, then, really all Edward did was score a couple points by scoring 6 for himself. And I don't know if that's exactly where you want to be at with your actions. But it's not a bad place to be at. While I'm thinking about my action here, I think, one of the interesting things is I never need to think about speciation again. There's no adaptation that I can do, so I'm not interested in those. Both the Wanderlust spaces were snapped up. I think that I was planning on Wanderlusting and maybe taking that fish or the plankton that looks like it's there. So I say, you know what? All right, let's jump all the way down, and I will score this. Oh, it's not a mount, it's a kelp forest. This is the problem with the glaring colors. Kelp Forest is even better for me. I'm uncontested. It's worth a little bit more points. It is still half, but 4 points uncontested is really great. And being able to take from the first 3 spaces gives me a couple options. A rules question is going to come up here where I essentially ask, hey, because of solar radiation, are cards that score points also going to score half points? And we're ultimately going to roll no. The cards that you score, those evolution cards, are going to score full points. I don't actually know what the right answer is. Try to look it up online. I looked this up before the event. There is no answer as far as I'm concerned. It's just whatever you decide to play at your table. I know some people will look at the rule book and say that there's a definitive explanation or example in there, and I don't think it's definitive, and I don't need to go too much into that tirade there. But I have 3 choices here, right? I have Predator, which is pretty good. I can use Predator to kill 1, 2, 3, 4 people, but I don't really know who I want to target at this point in time. And in all of those spaces, every place where I can Predator somebody, removing someone from the board is just punishing them. It gives me nothing. Because I'm already winning in all those spaces. I'm either winning on ties, or I'm just winning by a majority of cubes, or in that land, killing someone. I'm playing against people who have 2 and I have 1, and they both went on tiebreakers. So I don't improve my position in any one of those spaces. Further, I just have a vast quantity of cubes. So removing other players' cubes is a little excessive, it feels like to me. In most games, I think Predator is the snap pick. Solar radiation is in the 2 spot, so I have to return 2 cubes from every space on the board. That'd be fine, except for my kelp forest space there means I need to return those 2 cubes to my board. I don't love doing that. Completely removes my cubes and marginally removes other people's cubes. I'm not going to take solar radiation over taking Predator there, unless I really want to remove it to prevent the half scoring thing. But that's not what I want to do. I don't want people to be scoring points right now. I want to get my giant pile of cubes and spread them out of the board. So I'm okay with half scoring being the case for a while. I need this game to be a little bit slower because Michael and Mai's tussle at the beginning put me a little bit more on the back foot than I had expected at this point in time. So instead I look at this other piece, which I can score 1 point per tile that touches the sun, which is a feeble 2 points for me. But I've already gotten the impression at this point in time that Edward is playing a game where he likes scoring points. And I can see that for him, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 points. And for other players, it's 3 or 4 points as well. So I am going to wind up deciding to take that for 2 points, just so other players can't take it for 3 or 4 points. And part of it is that, I'm not worried about the rest of the actions. Predator action, what's someone going to do? Kill my million guys and I get a couple points for it? It's fine by me. The only one that I think I'd really be sad to lose in this game is maybe that land one. Maybe the guy that's tied in the seamount with Edward. But scoring points is just going to be, I think, a little bit better. So I take advantage of that and do exactly that. That card that we just flipped there is really interesting. It is a lot like what I have with Population Explosion. You can tell because there's just a bajillion million fish on it. It's this one, Fecundity. There we go, Fecundity. That one is place 1 species everywhere where you already are. Super sexy for someone like Isaac right now, right? He's got his purple pieces spread out everywhere. Having a second person gives you resilience against competition actions or someone just randomly sniping one of your guys with one of those evolution cards. Having a second person really helps. And if you spread out to 6, 7, 8 places, it's basically like taking a speciation action all in of itself. all over the place. Really strong, I think. Michael then notices that taking that pink was kind of a funky option there, and he goes to take the regression action to prevent himself from losing it. So, a little bit slow. I think he feels like his hands are a little bit tied right now. And I think he just kind of continues to be struggling a little bit. Issac now pivots into scoring points, and I think that he kind of had been thinking about this survival, the vent strategy from the beginning, which is why he put that sun up there. It's going to score him 3 points because of that triangular scoring rule. Is 2 vents that are next to each other. And he gets to put a free cube onto that space. Now, that does make Edward a little bit better off right now if a survival event scores, right? Because now he's on 2 different places and he does have the majority of cubes there. But I think that Issac is planning to try and move in on the vent game in the long run. That's why you take tectonics generally, is you're looking to move in on that vent game. I see. Okay. And then Michael used his camouflage power to get up there and just send a suicide guy up there, which, I think is very reasonable. He hasn't placed a lot of cubes. He's not going to be speciating a ton. And so he should use that camouflage action. Like, yeah, if he goes extinct and a couple of people die, that's fine. You have 30 some cubes for a reason. He's not going to be kind of the primary target for people killing his cubes right now anyway. So why not? I like that play for him, even though it seems kind of nonsensical. He's just giving himself options, and the downside is kind of limited. Edward's going to continue to use his flight option to just kind of keep it on. Speciating out of that tile right there is amazing for him because it puts him in first place, and second place in seamounts, which generally score a lot of points, even though they're not scoring this round, and allows him just put a ton of extra crustaceans into play. I think that's a pretty nice, clear play there. But another option for him is does he still have his? No, he doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't. Okay, never mind. Am I right about that? Yeah, he doesn't have that. Okay. Great. I moved down to domination. Pretty straightforward play there. I just want to make sure I have that white disc, the white cylinder, so I can have more action options. I'm not scoring the sands. I'm not scoring the oceans. So it's that or recall, and I don't want to recall at just having played 3 cylinders again. So domination is nice for me, and I'm in 4 different spots, so it's actually worth 8, which is great. Michael then jumps all the way to the bottom to do exactly the same thing, which I think makes sense for him. It's a kind of a little bit of a sadder option because he's only got the 2 spaces for 4 there. Not that anyone else is really contesting the snails, but those are going to be end game points. And so obviously the ideal situation would be that he has those 2 plus the 3 spaces around the snail on the left, and he could get 10 points for it. If he had a 4th action there that he wanted to take, like, I can't quite see what the speciation colors are, but like if that one there is actually like a brown one, personally, I would have speciated out of brown if that is indeed what it is, but I might be misreading it, and then reclaimed and then just gone for the white cylinder later. And that's because I've played a couple times where, rushing the white cylinders, they're good, but they're not as game breaking as you might think. They give you, access to more options, but they don't necessarily just let you do anything. Issac then kind of continues to use the migration action to put his people in the positions that he most wants to be. This action isn't lovely for him because he doesn't have that many people in play, and he moves his people into the reef here to tie for second place. Just like not that exciting. I mean, taking over the mount is nice, but I think what I might have done is Issac instead. I see why he does the thing with the land, right? Because now land, he can go ahead and take the first land spot. I think, right, that's what he's thinking, is that he can go to evolution. But I think I might have considered as him just going to ocean, scoring that ocean tile, and then taking my choice of the evolution tokens. And I would have taken fecundity. So I think that's maybe a missed opportunity for Issac, because that would allow him to place, like I said, 7 or whatever pieces on the board. He'd then be tying Edward up in the thermal vents, which is nice for him. He'd have a little bit more flexibility in the other places. He'd have more dominance in the seagrass area there. I think that would have been a stronger play for him. Oh, now that I say that, I realize that I'm suggesting an illegal play because he doesn't eat anything in the oceans. So actually, no, because that plankton was removed that put them there in the first place. So now that I see that, I'm realizing he did the move action so that he could put his people where they needed to go, right? Where they can eat. So actually, I take it back, Issac. My bad. Your play was great. I let out a big sigh of relief as I put my white disc on the move infinity pieces. You can see the smile on Isaac's face there as he's like, this is so insane to watch. And we're just trying to figure out how I'm going to go ahead and move, literally all 31 pieces at this really early stage of the game. And you're going to see me just kind of explode out everywhere. Michael's going to point out that he thinks other players should have maybe taken the tectonics action to sort of bounce up my pieces back to my board. It's very clear that like Michael plays this game in that kind of way. That's what he's indicating right there. But I think that both Edward's piece was out, so he didn't really have the option. I think that he had played his piece to speciate a while ago, so it wasn't really unless that was like Edward's priority, which I think it's not, right? Like he wants to continue scoring, and Issac kind of has the same sort of strategy where he's valuing his own development of his board over putting down one player. And you see that they would have bounced like 15 cubes for me or something like that. Let's say 4, 8, 12, 6, 7, maybe 18 or something. But 18 cubes, those can come into play with 2 speciation actions. So by you spending an action, you cost me 2 actions. The players who are really benefiting are the players who are not doing that tectonics action. Now, it is a little bit more valuable if you're saying, hey, now that I'm doing this tectonics action, now I am on multiple tectonics tiles. So I could see an argument for Edward going for it. But like I said, his white cylinder was locked up. So now we're looking at this move of mine, and I'm just saying, where can I go to just cause the most damage, right? So I'm trying to move pieces everywhere to take advantage of the fact that I can beat Edward in ties, which is what you see me doing in that mount on the top right side. I'm going to treat this board like north is like up on your screen, even though it's actually here in the actual board itself, but this is the way we're looking at it. So you see me kind of like saying, yep, I'll just kind of maintain the lead in the mount here, and then I'm just going to send all of these pieces out. I'd like to take over this lands tile right there so that I can score that with future evolution actions, because those 2 tiles are there, and maybe it's going to be a while before everyone reclaims, even though I'm about to reclaim on my next turn. And then I'll just kind of spread out everywhere else, putting myself in first position in as many places as I can. And if I can't be first position, I'll at least be second position so I can score something. I put a bunch of people in that cult force there, even though I'm already in charge, because the board is going to expand out that way, right? Like that's a good way for those pieces to continue living their life. That's part of the reason why I overload that land, is because I kind of figure they can go left or right depending on where people are going to go. And Michael was just talking about tectonics, so he says, you know what, I'm going to go and do exactly, put my money where my mouth is. And I think he's really, really focused on me, which is fair, but I don't know that at this point in time it's that valuable. He's going to bounce, 4, 5, 6 of my people, depending on where he chooses. But he's not super contesting the vents space himself. I mean, I guess he's in second place there. So maybe he actually does put himself in a good position here. Yeah, actually, now that I see it, by choosing that spot, he actually puts himself in charge of the survivor card. So it's a little bit better. But I do think that he primarily takes this action as a way to stop me. I mean, at least that's what he says at the table at the time when we're doing this. I don't hate seeing this. It seems like it would suck to get 6 of your pieces off the board, but this now gives me an option to take a speciation action somewhere. And, it's at the cost of an action. But what that is kind of like an airdrop. Depending on where the food is on the board, I might be able to take a speciation action later in the game, kind of like what Edward did with the sun down, kind of in the land area down there, and just sort of drop my people somewhere. So having that option now is actually not terrible for me. So I think, in retrospect, again, going back to the beginning of the game with the population explosion thing, it was unnecessary to put extra cubes in the middle because I don't want to put everyone in play. Having a few in your reserve just gives you that speciation option in a way that I think is valuable in the future. Issac, I think, has just his cylinder left. My guess is he could do Wanderlust and Reclaim, but it's only 1 point with the coral reefs, and he doesn't really have the people to Wanderlust anywhere. So instead what he does is he's going to actually speciate out of the space that he had set up. And now that's wonderful for him because he is now set up more in the land up there, more in the vents. And we see now that there's a tie pretty equally between, is it 3 players? 1, 2, no, Edward's down 1. It's 3 purples and 3 oranges. But the purples are most spread out. So he's giving himself the option to get into the vent game, and anytime that survival card gets flipped, score 6 points. He's eating in all those spaces, so it's not like he's concerned about the food situation. That's great for him. He's going to have to recall next turn. I'm going to have to recall next turn. Michael's going to have to recall next turn. So we are looking at a reseed event very, very soon. I don't know if Edward considers that when he takes his action. He may or may not. He still has a couple cubes. Like he could take a speciation action out of pink, but he's already got his guys out where he wants them. So there's no special reason for him to do that. So he goes ahead and just takes a 1 point Wanderlust play, expands his pieces outwards and says, I can eat sun. Why not? I'll be the only one out there. Gives himself a coral reef space. It's not a strong play, but it's also like not a weak one. It's a totally fine play to sort of like see what happens. And again, he's flyer, so he can put anywhere on the board as his first action and not really be too concerned about what other folks are going to do about it. He doesn't really need to adapt. I think that if I was in his position, I might have, if that first abundance tile is indeed a pink one, I might have put that pink tile out there because I really like taking domination for like bigger multipliers, upping your domination token from 6 to 14. If you're on 8 spaces, rather than just the starting 3 times 2, that's essentially an 8 point play, and 8 points is, more than 1 point. It requires some more setup. But it also keeps your people a little bit more likely to survive on the board. So currently his people are on, 6 safe spaces. And I think that I would have done abundance in his position, but so be it. All right, looks like I was wrong about Issac. Looks like he's got another tile, and he's going to go ahead and take Predator there, which is huge for him because it's going to let him take over the vents, kill people in some other spots, and he'll knock me out of that seagrass there. That's a really, really nice card for him. Almost as good as Fecundity. Maybe even better, actually, in this instance, because it knocks other folks off the board. And here's where we get to see if mind control takes place. That's an obvious kill. So you'll notice that he's not killing my guys, right? They score me a point. And in most of the instances, they're actually not going to help Issac too, right? He's in a position where killing my folks isn't going to help him. So instead, he's going to take either more defensive actions or actions that put him closer to second, because killing me and giving me a point isn't as valuable as just sort of like creating more parity with other people. He does in the reef there, which I do think is very interesting. Well, no, in the reef it actually makes sense because I've left 5 people there, so knocking me down puts him into first place. Nope, tied for second place. So he's in second place. Which I think demonstrates that he maybe has more concern about me than the crustaceans at this point in time. Which I think is fair, being intimidated by kind of the huge board presence versus the crab's point lead. That being said, I've got all but 6, and Edward has all but 10 in play. So I actually think Edward is in a pretty nice position right now. And I think Edward knows that too, right? Like, he spent the beginning of the game developing, scoring. And he did that where no one was getting in his way, whereas Michael and I were fighting. And Issac has also been developing, but he's last in the turn order, and you can see sort of where his options are getting limited. And he's having to do a little bit of extra work, right? Like, Edward essentially stole Issac's play, right, with that sun down in the land area there. And Issac eventually got to get back there, but being beaten out on turn order is part of what allowed him to do that. All right. So Edward's got a wide open board now, and because I misread Issac's situation, it's not actually a reclaim. His land got taken from him, so that's not really much of an option. He doesn't have anyone in the kelp. I think that if I'm Edward, I probably hop down to sand, score the 2 points, and then trigger one of the cards. If I know that I'm going to be scoring repeatedly in this game, like, I maybe want to get rid of solar radiation. He is kind of spread out. That being said, solar radiation does hurt himself in a couple spots, so not so great. This is part of the problem with solar radiation. And so he's going to take that freebie Wanderlust action for that 3 points. And you can see that Edward really, again, just super valuing those Wanderlust options, essentially giving himself the ability to score those points, spread out as far as he can. In this instance, he can't really spread out any further. Like, he's only got the 1 piece there. I'm a little bit surprised to see him not put that in that kind of like ocean elbow, just north of the sand, because then he could move one of the people from his sand region into there and he'd still score the 3 points. I think he's wary about it being maybe connected to other people, but that being said, there's not a lot going on for other folks over there. There's no food for anyone to have, and he doesn't even put the plankton token out because he can't eat it, so why should he make it good for anyone else? So, basically he just says, I'll take 3 points. Michael says, sure, I'll throw a guy out there. I've been doing this all game long. I'll stay consistent. And I don't know that Edward needed to rush the Wanderlust action. My guess is that probably in his play group, people really like that action a lot more. Like, he's maybe concerned that one of the rest of us are going to take it, and then it's not going to be his option anymore. That being said, I think he maybe overvalues it a little bit. To my opinion, he overvalues it a little bit, because he could do that at any time. Flight or not, you're allowed to play your white tokens wherever you like on the board. So, having the extra option after the reseed when Issac passes to take any action or do a really sweet Wanderlust or whatever, I think would be a little bit nicer for him. Now he jumps down to sand and he takes that awesome fecundity card that I think Issac really wanted, but he kind of let the moment slip from his hand. There were a couple chances, maybe just the one chance, but it's going to be a lot of pieces for him. And I think with this play, Edward moves into first. He has all of his pieces in play. They're spread out all over the place. And he's a huge point lead on us. I mean, he's 20 points. He has basically 20 points over the second place person, which is a big gap. I mean, big gaps in this game are hard to overcome. They can be overcome, don't get me wrong, and end game scoring in this game is a lot, but everybody scores a lot at the end because, you score for first and second and third, and it looks big, right? Because you're like, oh, I took this land tile, it's 8 points, but second place scored 4. So if second place is the person you're concerned about, then you really only scored 4 over that person. Obviously, when you are in a land uncontested on your own, that's even better. But the end game scoring is huge. I don't want to downplay the end game scoring, but in game scoring is just as huge, just as significant. People have really valued tectonics in this game, and so that's why you see me kind of like say, ooh, I'm going to maybe take that tectonic space. There's 2 reasons I go for this. One is that's a 10-point space right there, right? Putting in the land down there, kind of wiping that area out does a couple things. One is it prevents Issac from scoring land tiles again, right? He can't score the points off of that tile and trigger another domination card. 2 is it will completely surround that sun, which both Edward and Issac have, and I'm concerned about both of those players, which means that when we go to reseed, which is very soon, that sun is going to disappear. Love to see that. 3, you might not notice it because of the glare, but that first card, that new card that flipped out there is like a disease card or something. Yeah, it's exactly that, disease. Disease says, while this card is in play, animals lose a VP whenever one of their endangered species is eliminated. And I'm saying, okay, if I can starve all those people up in the vents, I'm not in the vent game. I'm not playing the survival game, which is where I want to be, but it's just not the game where that's going for me. Everyone will die. That's great. I want them all to starve to death, and then they'll lose a couple points for it. And if I lose points, I'm immune because I'm a cannibal. So I'll go ahead and throw my free dead guy back into play for doing that. What did Michael do? I missed what Michael did, but then we just hit another reseed. Oh, he took an abundance action and he put the pink worm over on the left side of the board there in the coral reefs. Yeah, that's great for him, and that goes back to the point I made earlier about Edward's playstyle here. We see him very much. He's just focused points. Score 3 points, whatever. You can put a guy there. I don't care. And to his credit, now Edward has gotten a free pink thing on the board because Michael wants to eat that, which is awesome for him. Now, if he wants to go and take domination action, he's sitting on 7 spots, so 14 points. So he could just take an 8-point action by just taking a domination action and upgrading the value of his pink domination cylinder from 6 to 14 points at the end of the game. Wonderful. For what it's worth, I think he should do that, especially given I would do that. But I think he especially should do it given that he's demonstrated his valuation of points. All right. The most important part of every reseed is what does the speciation look like and what does the evolution look like? I think the wanderlust matters, the abundance matters, the adaptations matter, but speciations and evolutions are the primary texture with which the game is going to happen. At this point in the game, speciation is actually less important because Edward basically has all of his pieces in play. I basically have all my pieces in play. Issac and Michael, not so much, though. So it kind of depends on what flips out with those. Now that there's more food in play, people are a little bit less needing of adaptations. That being said, acquiring them is nice. They can give you multipliers for your domination scores. They might make it so that if you're a little bit struggling with food, you can just have double redundancies. So you're kind of immune to being attacked by those evolution cards that remove things. But I think at this stage of the game where abundance becomes a little bit better, you just kind of say, okay, well, I can eat these pieces here. And again, that's also a multiplier. So I do really dig how the domination tokens score at the end of the game, that kind of like multiplying of your adaptation versus your abundance and how many tiles you're actually on the board. I think it's a really nice way to bring all the pieces of the game together into one scoring system there. Speciation we see is plankton, which is nice for me and Isaac, especially Isaac, right? Because he's the one who needs pieces. And then we see a lot of yellows, and I think that's a brown, which is what Michael wants to see because he wants to expand. Those yellows, though, a little awkward. There's only the one space on the board, and it's surrounded by fish. So speciation, a little bit awkward there. Wanderlust, a bunch of options across the board. And then let's look at evolution, because that's most important. I think that's a land tile again, which is interesting because there's really no land tiles. And then, nice flip for me, because I think that's a double kelp in slots 2 and 3, and I'm the only one who's on any kind of kelp tile. Slot 4 there is coral reef, which is really good for both Michael and Edward, because they're kind of alone in those coral reefs on the left there. And it's the 4th slot, giving them a lot of options. And that 5th slot being sand is obviously great for Edward because he gets to take it immediately, which is what he does. And he does it by himself. And now he can take any card. Disease is kind of cruddy. That green one's only going to score him 1 point, the one in the 3rd slot. So he could use the 2nd slot card, which lets him mess around with food. Or, of course, he's going to take the volcanism card because it allows him to do tectonics action, which is going to score him points. I think that means he's going to do it up there. Yep. He could, in theory, place it on a seamount and like blow up pieces. So like if he was playing the Michael way, you know, maybe he could play it on one of those seamounts that has a bunch of my tokens on it. But he says, you know what? Nope. I'll just do it up north here. It's going to score me 6 points. That's what I care about. 6 is more than 1. So go ahead and give me that plus the 2 points for sand. That's an 8-point turn for him, which is where you want to be in this game. 8 points is a pretty strong turn to have. And at this point, I'm just praying that extinction cards come out so that my game plan about killing everyone in the north comes to fruition. Whew. Okay. No death, but I think we just flipped Profligate Carnivores, which is not good for me, or Edward, which is interesting, but it is one of the best cards, in my opinion, in the game. It says eliminate X opposing species anywhere on Earth, where X equals the slot this card occupies. Replace each species this way with one from your own gene pool. So you can kill up to 5 people and put up to 5 tokens in play if you grab it from the top of the track. I think Profligate Carnivore is absolutely gnarly, and when you see it at the top of the track, if you can grab it, you should grab it. It completely changes the texture of the board layout. It's absolutely insane. And also the art is like kind of meta looking. The ocean is cool, man. All right. I jump down. I take advantage of the kelp forest there, and I don't want to score solar radiation because, again, it's going to hurt my solo people in the oceans there. And also, I don't mind that the half scoring is happening. Like, it's a little awkward for my kelps, but it's a little awkward for everybody. I'm not really like in charge of the scoring. Double kelp is nice for me. I maybe should have considered solar radiation a little bit more, but my people at the bottom there, they just they do not want that to be the case. I maybe should have considered not moving them there so I could take solar radiation, but at the time when I moved them, I wasn't feeling like I was going to be the player scoring. So I just moved that pink into a space because, like I said, what I would have done if I was Edward is I would have dominated and scored a bunch of points for that pink worm. So I take that pink worm off, and also it puts his pieces into threat. If we had flipped an extinction right there, it's a lot of pieces that would have died. Yeah, ton of pieces. He would have lost a bunch in the seamount there, something like 6 or 7 or something like that. He would have lost 6 or 7 points as well. Not the one touching the green, but those other 2. I think he can't eat anything in. Instead, we flip a survival card, which Does anyone score for that survival card? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, Issac must have scored 10 for that. Oh, yeah, he goes from 13 to 23. Yeah, that was a really, really nice flip for Issac. Really unfortunate for me because I want people to die. So he's just kind of like playing this game of chicken with the deck for as long as his pieces live up there. And he's not going to move him for that reason, right? If he's in charge with the survivor card, just like, okay, we'll just keep on doing that gamble. Michael gets some much needed pieces on the board. Getting them into the sands there, really important for him because it's a sand scoring round. And Issac grabs another sun. I think a lot of people underestimate the value of tripling up. There are on the board 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 potential places with sun. And if he manages to get onto all of them, that'd be 7 times 3 is 21 points. Upgrading a 6 to 21 is a 15-point play. So it's a lot easier said than done. That being said, he's already on 4 of the 7 spaces. So, one speciation action gets him on 6 of the 7 spaces, and that's enough too. Because he also wants to get over into that sun on the left side of the board. So a lot of options there. And all of us were, knuckleheaded enough to leave Edward the ocean expansion wanderlust tile. I think that was a mistake on all of our parts. We should have grabbed it. It's 10 points. Like, just a lack of sight on our parts. I think that the piece was recently removed by Issac, but not so recently that we couldn't have done that action. I think just a mistake, honestly. Michael immediately scores off with his speciation because I'm going to give him second place scoring in the kelp forest there. And you see I'm trying to catch Edward's just like huge scoring lead because he's just maintained that 20-point scoring lead all game. At least I've made it so that he's not 30 points over me, he's 20 points over me. So that 20-point lead has been maintained across the other players, but I have closed the gap personally, which I like to see. And again, we don't wind up flipping an extinction, which I'm desperate to see. Oh, interesting. So Michael bumps Edward to grab another wanderlust action, and he uses his white token to do so, which gives Edward his piece back. And Edward's the ugliest player to give the piece back to, right? Because with flight, he just has so many options of what to do with that action disc. So really, really nice for him to see that. And I actually didn't quite see what tile Michael grabbed. Oh, it must have been the third coral reef. So it's going to be 6 points there. An option for Michael, I think, could have been speciating again out of the yellow, the sponges, just to get more people on the board. And then Edward would have recalled, and he could have used one of his normal pawns to take that action. Maybe he's worried that I'm going to take the coral reef for the 6 points when Edward reclaims, but I think I would have tried to be greedy as Michael and slow rolled it a little bit. That being said, as I mentioned earlier, speciating out of that sponge is not the most exciting. It just gets more of his pieces on the board because there's just not as much orange as he might like right now. And that's another reason, because it gives him redundancies on his food over there for snails. And this is great now for him, right? Because he's in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 snail spaces. So he can upgrade his 4 to 12 points if he wants to. Oh, maybe he just moved into a 7 snail play. Yeah, 7 snail spaces. Yeah, that's a nice play for Michael. I just think he could have also made that play by speciating, but maybe he's got plans further down the track. I mean, like I said, he does want to score points, right? That's ultimately his goal, is to score points. I send one suicide fish into there with the thinking that I can probably get an abundance or a wanderlust action to drop an additional plankton adjacent to it, because I kind of need to expand out my food resource. And then Issac does something that I hate to see. He grabs another plankton, which means he is making a play for the plankton domination token with that *2 right there. Really, really devastating for me to watch him make that move. And at this point, like, there's just only so many circles, right? And there's only so much time in the game. There's a limited number of actions, but if he takes that from me, it's an 8-point loss for me. I can't afford losses at this point in time. So it's really unfortunate. And what Issac's doing here is nice. It is a sneaky way to score points in this game, because people for some reason don't seem to pay attention to the very obvious and onboard points that exist for those domination tiles. Like, I can tell you right now that pink tile is worth 10. And man, am I glad that I moved Edward's piece, because I just took away, 6 additional points from him. The domination actions can really get there, I think, for a little bit here, but then I basically don't have any options because I can't go upstream. So the domination action here I'm looking at is to take the green domination, because there's only the one green tile on the board. It's a piddly 3, but it gives me another action. I don't know that I would normally take this, because 3 points is not that many, and I don't value having 2 white cylinders that much. But seeing that Issac is probably going to box me out of my other white cylinder, I say to myself, you know what, I need to grab this as soon as possible. Because having one white cylinder is important at some point in the game, right? You need the ability to cheat the rules somewhere, or the ability to take one of the special actions, move infinite pieces, take the free turn with the Wanderlust. Those are the 2 kind of most important ones when it comes to those. But also just bumping people out of the evolution spaces, if you need to take those, very valuable. We have another kind of weird moment in this game where Michael takes the tectonics action and then kind of thinks about it, wants to place it essentially somewhere where it touches other tectonics tiles, but this really bizarre tectonics rule doesn't allow you to place anything unless it's on the outer ring of the board, which really limits his options, right, to just a couple places. And then because of the tournament rules, it's sort of like you play your pawn, you're stuck with playing your pawn. The great irony here is that he's going to wind up venting his own space, which makes sense, because when he vents, he gets to put a free guy there for venting action, and his camouflage lets him put one as well. So he's going to shoot up to suddenly being in first place on vent tiles. But a couple of his people are endangered. And he's only going to be on the 1, 2, 3 tiles at the point in time that he does this action. So 6 points every time a survivor thing comes up. But we're due for an extinction event. It hasn't come up in just ages. And that would put him down to just 2 tiles. And that coral reef is no longer then going to kind of be able to score. And reef is in the evolution track, right? Like, it's something that actually is quite valuable this turn. So he ends up having to hurt himself a little bit to take this action. And you can see how long he's agonizing over it, because it ends up not being as good as he wants it to be. But he's sort of a little bit committed to this course of play. Yeah, he's pointing out the only 3 spaces that he can go. And going in the south there is very not appealing. So he will just grab kind of that one solitary solo piece, score 1 point for it. And it's so interesting, because I don't think this is a good play, and like, spoiler alert, this is really going to pay off for him. And so I guess my main lesson from that, like knowing that it's going to pay off for him, is that when you're behind, like you kind of want and need to take some risks about where you're at in order to catch up, because he's behind on points, he's behind on board development. He really doesn't have anything going for him up until this point of the game that any other player doesn't have or has better than him. So he makes this play, and it's going to end up really paying out for him. Issac then completely throws down and grabs that third blue food tile. Now I'm realizing an option that I could have had was I could have used my white cylinder. Oh, you know what? I'd have to look that up. But adaptation... I'm going to pause the game. Hold on. Never mind. I was wrong. Nothing to be concerned about. I could have used my cylinder to go up there, grab that adaptation token, and take the triple blue. And maybe that's what I should have done. Now that I'm looking at this game, I actually think that was a mistake on my part. Because I'm in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plankton locations, with the possibility of there being more. So taking the third one could have bumped my 8 to 15 points. It's better than the 3 I would have gotten for the green. I think that's what I was planning on doing with that green cylinder, and I did not realize how much Issac was down to attack me in that position. I kind of anticipated that I would get that spot, and I underestimated how much he liked this play of going hard on the plankton there. I think part of the reason I also anticipated that, or didn't anticipate that too, is that I just, at this point in the time, I don't see myself as the threat in this game. Edward is the threat. Like, he's got more cubes in play than anybody. He has more points than anybody. And has just done a really nice job of putting himself in that position. But Issac also, sees this as a way to like kind of multiply his own points, and he doesn't see necessarily other good paths for scoring points. So I can see why he does that. I think that if I was in Isaac's position, I would be probably gunning for that profligate carnivores if I could, although it's only in the 3rd slot now, and those are kelps. Yeah, I mean, maybe what I would have done in Isaac's position is speciate. No, I like Isaac's play. I don't see any problem with it. All right, you see me hop up to take the free Wanderlust action. I grab this plankton here. I'm probably going to expand out. Yep, so those kelp there. This is kind of a perfect little set. These no action here is amazing, but I get 3 points. I get to put a plankton into play that connects to that reef where my folks are starving, and I get to expand a little bit more into the kelp forest here. So it's just a little edge value play that adds up to be, I think, more powerful than some of the other Wanderlust actions that we've seen. Not as powerful as scoring, to say 10 points, but it does a lot of work for the one action. And I'm going to get to have another turn after this, which is pretty nice. So that feels good. Everyone's going to kind of decide whether they move in or not. I think mostly folks aren't going to, because they would starve there, but Michael's probably going to take his freebie and throw him on there, because why not use camouflage? Camouflage is a very powerful ability. Part of my thinking here too with splitting the kelps is that I can start drafting some points behind Michael. Like, I'm going to reclaim, and then he can take the evolution action to score some kelps, and I'll then be at the top of the track. So by the time I get down there, maybe he's reclaiming and I can score my kelps again. Like, it opens up a lot of options, which is sort of the hope there. Now, thinking about my second action of this round, that new kelp forest comes up, and I could say, hey, maybe I'll just do another Wanderlust action and score 6 points. But I don't have a ton of folks up on that side of the board right now. I mean, I do have those guys in the vents who are starving, but I don't really want to save anyone else from starving either. And my folks would still be starving because there's no good food on the Wanderlust tile. I'm not a big fan of just like scoring 6 unless there's no other good plays for me to take. So then I got to think, like, could I score something else? Well, evolution wise, things don't look really great. Oh, it looks like of course, I didn't have my blue cylinder, so I couldn't have stopped Issac. It's so hard to see the top of these discs sometimes. So I couldn't have stopped Issac, and I took that green one with the hope of grabbing his thing. So I just did the classic, do the Wanderlust and reclaim action. It's getting pretty late for me. I'm about halfway through this game, actually almost exactly at the halfway mark. So this is going to be a spot where we're going to go ahead and stop. I'm going to make sure that I write this down, and we'll pick up really soon, folks. I'll look a little bit differently in a minute to you, but it'll be a little while for me. So hopefully I can pick up the thread from here, and it's been great. Appreciate it. See ya. And we're back. Let's get back on the road. All right. So where we left off, or where it's exactly the same for you, it's Michael's turn in the middle of the game. The crustaceans are, setting the point lead by a fair distance and have been for a while, really focused on that one goal of scoring points. I've got a bunch of cubes on the board, but still not as many as the crustaceans. And I'm second point leader. Issac it looks like he's, in a solid third place there, but he is setting up for really nice endgame scoring by having some huge domination actions with the sun and with the plankton. Unfortunately, that's going to steal some points from me as well. And Michael is the player that I'm kind of most concerned about at this point in time, but he's not taken the survival card yet. It's kind of actually a split still between the players. And there's been this tension for many turns about whether we're going to flip an extinction card or not. And if we do, it's actually even going to be some negative points for people because of that disease card that Michael just touched. I mentioned that card that he's looking at right there, that Profligate Carnivores, is to let him kill 3 people and put 3 cubes on the board. That can really shore up his position in a lot of different areas and target kind of the players that he needs to target. And I think one of the things that Michael is doing here, constantly checking these domination cards, these evolution cards, these are, I talked about how scoring is like fundamental to the core of this game. Evolution cards are actually the core to this game. And the reason for that is twofold. Taking the evolution action scores points, and the cards themselves have good actions. The cards are not at all created equal, but a lot of the cards are as powerful, if not more powerful, than an actual action that you could take on the board. Profligate Carnivores, for instance, in the 3rd slot here, where it's only 3rd place is powerful, right? It's even more powerful in the 4th or 5th slot, is better than any competition action you could take in this game. That's the kill other people action. And it's kind of like a bit of a weaker speciation action, all stapled together into one card, which is a lot. It does a lot. That is something that I think players really need to consider. Like, you should always be looking at what cards are coming out. And if you're a player who's like sitting on sand or reef at the end there, that you can score the 4th or 5th card slot, you really need to be paying attention to what's coming out. To that point, actually, let me get my stack of cards so I can reference everything. All right, back at it. The reason I want to grab cards is because that 4th card there is the one that looks like Michael's been evaluating there. And that one says gain 1 point for each element on Earth that matches an element type on your animal. So Michael's going to count up every pink, every brown, every yellow, and score those points for taking that card. So that's a nice way for him to just catch up a little bit. It's not as impacted by the solar radiation based on that earlier ruling. And it's going to put him, that gives him like almost 10 points. That's a nice turn that puts him from a position that looks really weak into one that's like actually suddenly a lot more viable. I do wonder, let's see, if he had taken Profligate Carnivores instead, what he could have done with that is grabbed like killed someone in one of the vents to put himself into their survival, right? He would have had 5 cubes on the vents, and then he's playing the casino game of whether, he'd appropriately flip something off the top of the deck there. He could sort of kill one of the, in that coral reef space on the left, he could have killed one of the crustaceans and put himself into first place there, which I think would be pretty nice. And similarly, in the seamount, all the way in the top right, he could have killed me or one of the crustaceans and put himself into first place there. So I do think Profligate Carnivores would have been a pretty powerful action as well. And he ends up deciding that he just wants to score the points right now, which is fair because he just has a bigger gap to make up. And we are getting on in this game to the point where I'd say where I can't quite tell that deck of cards, and I haven't been counting how many we've gone through. But this feels like the halfway point or more than halfway point, honestly. I'm cheating a little bit because I know how long this game is. And like I said, we're at the halfway point right now. But even still, Isaac goes ahead and steals, unfortunately, my white disc from me, which is, I saw it coming for a couple turns and there was just nothing to stop that train wreck. Unfortunately, he really did a nice job of putting himself in the position to lock me out of that. It scores him 15 points and takes away 8 from me. It's a handful of actions for him to have done that, but it really hurts. This was kind of the point in the game where I went from feeling like, oh man, like I was doing really well to maybe this game is not going for me. Like I'm not the point leader. I'm not the number of cubes on the board leader. I don't have really any good endgame scoring with the domination tokens. So I'm going to have to make up a fair amount of distance here. I would consider my spots maybe be in third place right now, actually. Edward goes ahead and does the thing he does, which is to Wanderlust, and he's going to double Wanderlust using that Wanderlust and Wanderlust again action. And he'll score himself 6 points both times for connecting, triple kelps and triple seagrasses together. So 12 points for him is a huge game, obviously. It continues to give more points and more points. This is me. Michael's talking about how we need to do something to stop him, and I'm like, great, I've been doing that kind of stuff. I need you to do something here. Anyway, Edward continues to just demonstrate that, like, right, what he's really focused on is getting those points, and you see that him and I run out of the survival area into that kelp forest, even though neither of us can eat any food there because we're not really doing anything in the survival zones in those vents. The only one that can really do anything in those vents are Michael and Isaac, and Edward and I are not looking to contest at this point because we can't eat there. We just aren't viable. He does, I think, kind of put food out on that seagrass spot in a way. It's like, I don't entirely understand why he puts the food out there. Like, it is good for Michael. He's got that camouflage thing. And so I can't quite tell the color. If it is yellow, then it really doesn't make any sense that Edward did that. I think that might have just been a mistake. But I don't know. It's tough to say, right? Just sometimes it's just it's so easy to grab those pieces and kind of move forward with your turn without thinking like, oh, this is going to hurt. And even though there's just a couple special powers, there's enough actions taking place in this game that you often forget folks' special powers. I think like flight, for instance, is a nice and easy one to forget. You look at someone, you're like, oh, okay, they can only go down below here, so I don't need to worry about him hopping up on the board. But no, he can do exactly that. All right, so I've had my white token taken, and I'm still back in this position of like, I'm probably not taking speciation. Like I can actually put a couple people on the board right now, but there's nowhere terribly that I want to be that I'm not already around food of mine. And what I want to do is keep those pieces for an action where I can airdrop in somewhere in the future. I'm not looking to just like get a couple more people on the board. So speciation doesn't seem great. And then above speciation, adaptation is full, so I'm not going to do any of that. And then I could do abundance, right? I can put out some more plankton to eat, but plankton is like a little bit better for Isaac right now. That being said, he's probably not going to dominate again, bumping from 15 points up, but I do consider for quite a while, like if I can get on 8 plankton spaces and do 8 times 2 to get 16, I can steal the plankton token back. And I only really want to do that somewhere near the end of the game, because if he just goes on to 6 spaces and then does 6 times 3 and he's at 8, it's a lot easier for him to steal it back from me than for me to steal it from him. But if I can put myself in a position where I can do it, and it's kind of like the last action of the game or second to last action of the game, I might just be able to kind of box him out in order. So I am thinking about that all game long, but I just don't like taking actions that are primarily better for other players than me. Looking further downstream, Wanderlust is completely full up. Tectonics is full unless I want to use my white disc. And so now I'm looking at migration. Do I want to move my pieces anywhere? There's a couple pieces that are locked up, particularly on the right side of the board there. Everything from that kind of like reef over. I just have these like clusters of folks that need to start moving around. It could maybe expand out into that seagrass area, which is just sort of lacking of people, and make some points for myself over there, or some options for myself over there. I don't love taking competition, and I do want to briefly talk about that. Like, no one has really taken competition in this game. It could be nice to ping out a single person or 2 people, and I've used that space occasionally in my practice games, but largely it's not that impactful. Killing 2 people is generally not as good as doing something like a speciation and just like outperforming a person. Even if they're winning, the way to primarily attack people in this game is through those evolution cards on the right. So it looks like I actually am thinking something different than I'm thinking right now. And I say, okay, I'm going to put some extra people out. I think that's probably because I just didn't want to go all the way downstream right off bat there. Like, folks are reclaiming very soon. So now I can take Tectonics or Wanderlust. I'm opening up my options. Now that I'm like seeing that makes a difference. And obviously, like, I go to first place in the kelp forest there, and that actually does put me into first place on the coral reef there as well, which is that 4th slot. I'm not excited about people scoring coral reefs on the left side of the board. So if I can take that 4th slot coral reef thing, I can take one of the cards off the board that's, up to the 4th slot, which is really nice, and prevent other players from scoring points, because I'm at this point with Issac's speciation action there. I can do any of those options, right? If they score any of those coral reefs on the left side, I'm just the only player who doesn't score anything, which is not a great place to be. I think Issac's speciation option here is a great choice for him. First of all, he puts himself in charge of the 5th slot, that sand slot. He's going to score the most points if someone wants to get that 5th slot there. If not, he's going to be able to run it. He's also in charge now of that coral reef on the top left, and is just scoring 2nd place points on the other coral reef. That was just a great speciation action for him. It just puts him in charge in all the places where people did not have many things, and he is the player who has, I think, the fewest cubes on the board. He's got the biggest distance to go there, and needs to kind of make up for that. You see Edward there reading Profligate Carnivores, and this is one of the kind of awkward things about having all your cubes on the board, is that, look, he's only got 2 on his board, so if he Profligates Carnivores, he's not going to be able to use it necessarily as well as someone else. And I kind of also did the same thing with myself, right? I put 5 of my, it looks like 6 missing cubes on the board, so I've only got 1 in reserve now. I can't make great use of Profligate Carnivores either. In my instance, it's, I think, in large part because I'm in almost all the places where I can eat food anyway. And actually, Edward is kind of in the same spot. The places where his cubes are where he can eat. So him just kind of showing up somewhere and being like, hey, what's up? Like, I've killed you in these places is only so impactful. That being said, he doesn't want solar radiation. He doesn't want that fish card, and I can't quite see what that 4th card is, so I can comment on it later. So when he lands on that coral reef space and says, I'm going to score that coral reef on the left side of the board there where I'm in first, immediately paying off Issac, by the way. Now what I can do is chomp down on these people over in the seagrass area, where I will then become the person that's scoring in these spaces. And like, as the crustaceans, who loses all ties, completely knocking people off the board is the most significant thing you can do. In fact, that competition action that I was just dunking on is ironically better for people in last place. Sorry, not in last place, like in the losers in the tiebreaker order, crustaceans, fishes, because completely eliminating someone from a spot is more powerful in general. Like knocking someone from first, like down one, so that you as like the reptiles now tie them and beat them is like solid, but it's not as good as like completely wiping someone out. And you'll see how many of the spaces on these board are these like 1-1 ties or these like 2-1 things, and using competition to like wipe someone off the board does that. That third one is not terribly good, but it does change kind of the tone of the game. I think it's called adaptability. Yeah, adaptability. So that lets him swap an element on his animal with one on Earth, which is really awkward because you're putting something on Earth that you're no longer eating. And so that's usually used to kind of like try to hose someone somewhere, and also like you maybe have moved your pieces off of like where that adapted token is necessary. But we see suns are all over the board. Like Edward doesn't want to get rid of his ability to consume sun. It's kind of keeping a lot of his animals alive. The thing that is interesting about adaptability, though, is that you can bump other people's white tokens with this. I just grabbed the tectonics action for 10 points. This is an action that is why I went and took the green-white token, or the green-white cylinder, even though it's not that great, because I see how much other people have been valuing tectonics. I see, there's a couple spaces like that one that I just took where you must have a white cylinder. And I kind of throw it down, just scoring the 10 points without thinking much else. And the person that I actually really benefit here, 10 points is big, don't get me wrong. Like the person I most benefit is myself, but another player that I really benefit here is Michael, because he uses that camouflage ability to drop that orange cube on there. And now he's at the magic 5. 5 is more than any other player. I've got 4, which is kind of by accident. I'm not trying to have the most. I just have the most. I've got 4, or second most, sorry. Purple has 4, brown has 2, and then Michael has 5 across 4 different spaces. So now anytime a survival card gets flipped, or one of the fat fishes for one of those evolution cards gets flipped, looks like that, he's going to score 10 points. And obviously, if we flip one of these extinction fish, the dead fish, like that, he's going to lose a bunch of those tokens because he's not eating in a lot of spaces. And Michael is really, really towing the line with luck here. It's interesting to me how comfortable he is with towing the line. And I think that he is just realizing because he is behind, he needs to gamble. I think most players would be looking at taking an abundance action or a migration action to move their pieces somewhere safe, or to put some appropriate food that they can eat into play. And Michael hasn't really prioritized those actions. What he just keeps on doing is trying to take advantage of what things are on the board. He had that like slow start at the beginning of the game, and now he's trying to, crack it, right? He's trying to like make that gap close. And he's leaning into the fact that like if he wants to win this game, and like really winning is the only goal of this game, then he's got to try and take a couple risks. To that point right now, he gets to do anything he wants to. So, I think what I would do if I was him is take abundance, take that pink token, and toss it on those kelps and survival token on the kind of left side of the board there, because he can't eat. And those pieces going away, if we flick an extinction, that's a lot of his pieces that are going to go off the board, and he pays points for it because of that the disease card that's in play. He also doesn't want to jump crazy far down the board, like leaving himself some options there is helpful. I can't quite see what's in the autotroph space. I think it's suns, but he doesn't eat suns, so he's not interested in swapping suns into play with that autotrophs action at all. Makes sense. Autotrophs action, I think, is one that generally is not a strong action. It's taking away someone else's food is then like kind of gambling that, hey, an extinction card is going to come up. The only time you can really guarantee that it's going to come up is at the very end of the game and when you think the asteroid is coming. So the nearer to the end of the game it gets, the better that autotroph action is. But you've seen already in this game how like I set up for a pretty gnarly extinction event and we've flipped 5-6 cards and no extinction. And Michael, right at the beginning of the game, set up for a really gnarly extinction event, and we only flipped 1 card then. But like, you can't bank on that as being the thing. I want to talk about the 4th card there because I think it is one of the more powerful cards in the game. Not in this one, and I'll explain why in a second. But the 4th card there is this bad boy, Bountiful Habitat. You can tell that orange fish. You can just barely see him off the glare. He says, pick a terrain type and score all the tiles of that type. I've seen someone use that card on land tiles and score 32 points right off the bat because they were the only ones spread out on land. Huge game changer. I'd love to score that for kelp right now in this game, right? Or there's an opportunity to score a lot of points for Edward if he takes it for sea mounts or something like that. Coral reefs also like a pretty busy action right there. A lot of people are going to score a lot of points. So we'll see what happens there. And what does Michael end up doing? Michael ends up going and bumping Issac, which is hugely interesting. He bumps Issac to take the 2nd pink token. And so he's saying to himself, I need to attack the leader, and this is going to score me points. He's looking at 1, 2, 3, 4 pink spaces right now, which is not quite enough, but there are definitely enough other spaces on the board for him to get to where he can take advantage and then do exactly what Issac did to me with the pinks towards Edward. So I think he's trying to evaluate, like, how can I get away with this? And also Michael, I think, is the player who's one of the ones who can use those white tokens the best. He sort of is seeing when he wants to bump people or take those special actions. So he's gonna make some gnarly use of it. Edward also has been using the white cylinder to continually take that Wanderlust action. So Michael is looking to block that as well. Edward then scores this sand spot. Ironically, more points for the reptiles and only like 1 point for him, so that he can score that card, that fish card, the Bountiful Habitats that I just talked about. And the choice he makes here, I think, is it's a curious one. He's going to choose reefs. And what ends up scoring here is for Edward, he gets 6 and 3 and 3. But they're halved. So 3, 2, 2. So he scores 7 points for that. I will score 3 points for that, for first place on that one over there. Purple's going to score 2, 2, 3. So purple scores actually more on this action. Purple scores 8 compared to 7 for brown. And orange is going to score like a piddly 1 or something like that. So this is a curious action, right? Because he creates no parity over Issac. In fact, Issac actually benefits more than he does. Scores a couple points over me and scores really more over Michael than anybody else. And I think that part of this is that it's just an action that he's like a little bit stuck in like what he can do, because Wanderlusting here, well, now that I'm actually looking at it, I think actually Edward should have used his flight ability instead of scoring sands to score that Wanderlust, because he could just score 6 points on the ocean and he would score those 6 points alone. I think that actually would have been a stronger play for him. But that being said, maybe he's very concerned about someone taking Bountiful Habitat and scoring something very good for them, right? If I score Kelp Forests, he hates to see that because that's points for me and for Orange, who are 2nd and 3rd place players right now in the points. So maybe he's just valuing he knows how nasty that card can be, and it's just knocking it off the board for that reason. But scoring those coral reefs was like only so for him. I actually also wonder if scoring seamounts would have been better for him. No, the seamounts would be better for me. Never mind. Actually kind of begs the question that if I had taken that card, whether seamounts would have been the action for me too. So here I can Wanderlust for 6 points. That's definitely an option. I can Tectonics for like a point and a guy, but I don't really want to do that. I'm not so interested in expanding the Tectonic space, I think. I could Tectonics and put it on the the top of the board, the water vents, score 3 points there, and actually I would then have 6 people on their survival. I actually wonder if I consider that action. I'm pretty confident that isn't what I do in this case, but I actually think that might have been my best play. Scoring 3 points and putting myself in charge of the survival card instead of Michael. That being said, really who I'm concerned about here is Edward. And so maybe just 6 points at Wanderlust is the way to go. Instead, though, I go and I grab the migration action, I think with the plans of kind of jumping down to evolution next. And part of that is because I just have dead people on the board, right? I've got that guy in the coral reef who isn't scoring anything. I have excess people in that seamount that you see moving out into the grasslands. And I mentioned that move action last turn, right? The ability for me to send 5 people around those kind of pretty empty grasslands. Pretty sure you're going to see one of my 4 people in the grasslands there move over to take over Edward's spot in the grass. There you go. This is exactly the problem with playing the crustaceans, right? Is every player at the table just needs to tie you. It is a lot easier to attack your board position. And so as the crustaceans, you just have to be farther and farther and farther ahead. Like Edward knows exactly what the position is that he needs to be playing. Similarly, right? Like I move those people there, and then Isaac or Michael can just attack me as well, just as easily. Primarily, you'd be doing that by speciating out of suns. Now, the one thing that's nice is I see that there are no suns to speciate out of right now, so anybody who wants to do that is doing it with a white cylinder. So definitely a very real expense because it's your action for the turn. There's no seagrass that's scoring right now anyway, right? There's none in the evolution track there. So I'm not as concerned that other people are going to do it, but by the end of the game, which is what I really care about, that can really get in my way. That being said, I still want to move into these places, right? Because if Isaac or Michael decides they want to kind of bounce me out, well, I'll still be second place and I'll score 2 points, and I'll have put Edward from what would have been second place into third place. And that's double scoring for me right now, right? Because he's the player that I need to catch. You see that I think that I was so of the mindset that I was not contesting the vents that I move straight out of that vent there, as opposed to taking the tectonics action this turn. And in this case, it makes total sense that I move those 2 people. They're starving. I don't think I'm contesting vents. So I want to get out of there. What I want is an extinction card to be drawn, and we have only drawn like 2 this game. It was like right at the beginning. So I'm just waiting for those to trigger. And I move a big pile into that kelp forest there, which seems a little bit counterintuitive, basically because my goal is to continue expanding out to the left side of the board where other people are not so good at expanding from, just to give myself some options there. The land tile up there on the left for wanderlusting, it's only going to score 1 point, but whoever goes there, if they own it at the end of the game, that's another 8, which is more points than I'm going to make by scoring 6 off of an open ocean, as long as I have the people there to do it. Okay. So Michael, despite not having placed one of his orange discs on the board, still needs to go below his white cylinder. It's one of the dangers with like doing white cylinder as your first action, is you've now limited your other actions, and you still need to, now he's stuck using only orange discs rather than the white cylinders, and he still needs to go below where that is. He could speciate, kind of drop a few people around that sponge there. I don't think that would be horrible for him, but he's pretty outnumbered in all those spots, so it's not the best. Wanderlust is 6 points still. I think that's a pretty viable option for the style of game that everyone here has played. I think that he's shown time and time again that He likes taking the tectonics action. There's no really good scoring spot, but maybe he just throws it on the bottom of the board, scores 3 points, and then throws like a suicide fellow there to just kind of continue playing the gamble game. Unfortunately, none of the evolution things are very good for him right now, and in large part that's because there are not a ton of orange folks in play, and the ones that are in play are around the vents. So instead he's going to say, okay, I need to catch up a little bit with my species, and he puts out those tokens, and, you know, they don't do much. He's still in last place in the coral reef. He put himself into second place in the seagrass there, and he does, however, bump Edward from third to last and put himself in third on that seamount there. That's probably a big deal, because if I end up sort of triggering seamounts, and we do have a reseed coming soon, so maybe seamount is scoring. God, Issac is so fast. He just essentially asserts control over the let me pause because we just had 2 very, very quick actions here. He took the sun last round, and then he took the yellow token as well, which just no one else really cares about, and he's going to be the one that has those 3 white discs. I've got to say, I don't know if taking that at this juncture of the game was appropriate. He already has so many white cylinders. Does he need the actions? And it's only 2 points. That being said, it does prolong his reclaim. So if he's looking at those evolution scoring cards and tiles, so you know, the land and so on and so forth, and says, you know what, I'm kind of okay with the way these are right now, that might be why he's kind of trying to like slow roll the reseed. So it's interesting to see, but it's not amazing for him. There's not enough turns left in the game that him having 7 actions is so much better than having 6 actions. Edward then reclaims on his turn. He's just out of options. He's all the way at the bottom of the track. And I guess actually one thing to consider, how many pink spaces was Edward on? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, also 5. Because by having Issac having blocked all 3 spaces in domination, no one else can take that. I hop straight on down, and I'm going to score the coral reef there. I'm going to score the one that I'm good at, even though this is a little bit good for brown too. I can't quite see what the other cards are, and I can't. Oh, I see. That's the one that scores for every brown tile that I'm on, or every tile that like touches brown food. And this is another one, just like when I took the suns earlier in the game, right? I score 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so I mean, that was a solid scoring turn for me. Let me just make sure that was correct. Hold on. I was at 49. So then I would score 3 plus another 5. Is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Yeah, which switched me up to 57. So that's an 8-point turn for me, but you know, it's also 2 points for Edward, so we can really call it a 6-point turn, which is fine. But the other thing is that other players don't score this card now, because we've really been taking advantage of these cards that score additional points, and I'm not the one who scores the most points from surrounding those snails, I think. The other thing is, as I mentioned before, I'm hating it when other people are scoring those coral reefs. And because Edward has flight, he can drop down there if he wants to, because then he can just move up the board instead of down the board. So I'm not trusting that isn't going to happen immediately. And I really don't want to see those other coral reefs be scored, because that coral reef is the better one for me to be scored. However, by doing that, you notice that I keep doing this where my cylinders are aggressively pushing to the bottom of the board, and it means I'm reclaiming more than the other players, which means that I'm taking fewer actions than the other players. So I really need to make sure that the efficiency is there, and mostly what I'm doing is just maintaining on efficiency with folks. I will say that turn of scoring, though, suddenly I'm back to being close to Edward again, where for a brief moment it really felt like he was completely running away with it. Issac, who looks like he's like in dead last here, is secretly holding another 32 points, right? So he doubles his score to go to 64. He has more points than I do right now. So Issac is not as in bad a position as he looks. I think if you walk by this board, you'd say that. I say this to him in the game because everyone in this game kind of does like a little, woe is me kind of thing. And Michael also doing just fine here. So he just scored 16. 10 of it was because we flipped another survival card rather than an extinction card. It's making a huge, huge difference for him. And then he does that Wanderlust action that I've been chatting about for a little bit of a while. And I think part of the reason that he speciated last turn was to essentially give himself the option to do that. I think he was hoping that Issac would reclaim and that he could then Wanderlust and put actually like a food out there that he could eat, right? Because he can then like throw his camo guys out there. Or actually maybe camouflage only lets you do it if other players are tectonicsing. Yeah, sorry. Only when other people Wanderlust or tectonics do you get to camo. All right, so Issac now has essentially all the options, right? Because he's got his yellow cylinder that I think he's holding in hand. And in theory, he could actually bump someone else's white cylinder. He literally could do anything. I think the sort of like Wanderlust reclaim action here is valid. He could score 3 points off the Kelp's Forest or 1 point off the other things. The problem is he doesn't have the people on board to like expand into new tiles. That's the part that really kind of is sucky for him. And instead what he does is takes the tectonics action using that white cylinder bumping ability that I mentioned. Nope. That's not what he's doing. What did he take? Oh, he bumped my blue cylinder, which is great because I'm not going to use that blue cylinder for anything because I'm already way at the bottom of the board. And he then puts some people on because I was just talking about how he just doesn't have enough cubes on the board and he's playing catch up on that speciation game. So he's getting into some areas there, but they're not the most exciting for him. The thing that I think is valuable about it is he's now 5 people on survival as well. And so Michael, who basically just lucked into scoring at 20 additional points there, rather than his people dying, is kind of in that position where Isaac's saying, all right, let's put a stop to this. I am respecting every opponent's position right now, which I think is pretty valid. Because everyone suddenly looks very viable, right? Like Issac, who looks like he's in last, has the most endgame scoring by a pretty big margin. Edward is still winning, but Michael is maybe looking to steal some of his endgame points. This is a play for Edward that I don't love. He takes the free Wanderlust action, and it's clear that he has valued the ever-living crap out of this action all game long, right? Like this is what he has a white cylinder for as far as I'm concerned. He throws down a 1 point thing and then takes the weakest tile, throws it in the bottom corner of the board. He throws a suicide guy in there, hoping that, maybe he can get some food on there or something, and the rest of us say no thanks. I really just think that's a waste of his white cylinder. I really don't like it. One of the cards he picked up there is insane. It is called Cladogenesis. It's one of the most powerful cards in the game. When it comes out, you need to respect it because it's the only card that does two things. So it tells you to resolve the top card of the discard pile and then resolve the card in the first slot. So he could score my snail thing again, which is actually something I was thinking about. But then he does have to trigger solar radiation. And ironically, him just moving alone into that space over there, not so great for solar radiation. But otherwise, solar radiation is not bad for him, right? He can bounce my people off the seagrass meadow. And I think it does. I think Cladogenesis could do some pretty gnarly stuff for him here. And he would score the mollusks, the brown food, which he is brown. So he's got 1, 2, 3, 4. It's only 4 points. But it's still 4 points. What did he end up doing? Did he score a card? Wait. Oh, he took habitat. Is that what that's called? Remove an element from Earth that matches a special pawn you don't control, and then put a element from Earth of a special pawn you do control. I see. Okay, so that one in the 5th slot that he just picked up, I think he's going to end up taking... I'm confused. Hold on. What just happened? I see what happened. This explains everything. He did the Wanderlust action. He moved his piece onto the sand over there. And then Edward made the exact same mistake, the rules mistake that Michael made at the beginning of the game. He triggered that spot. He scored his 2 points. And then he realized the rule came up again. It's like, there's no food for you to eat there. You don't get to trigger a card when you go to that space. That's a bad mistake for him to make at this stage of the game. Because like I was saying, Cladogenesis could do a lot of work and score him a couple points. That habitat card would allow him to put food into play in the middle of all those brown guys in the seamount that he has sort of just been like lucking out that, again, like they're not dying and haven't been for ages. Plus would allow him to put another pink token into play so that he can defend his domination token for pink. That is a rough mistake. I do remember that now. My dishes are done. Him going there and domination there just means I'm done, right? Like this is what I was talking about, me just like pushing straight down the board. I just am taking fewer actions. I'm just really hoping the ones that I am doing are making the difference there. And currently it's not going super well, right? I'm a bit behind at this stage of the game. And I think that Michael would be, if he hadn't had a couple nice flips with the survival cards, he would be in last. But actually those survival cards, that he's given himself the opportunity to catch up. And you see now that he's moving 5 people, now that I've recalled he can do that, he's moving back into the vents to say like, yep, this is my mechanic. Like this is how I'm catching up here. That being said, the number of survival cards we've flipped is quite high. The number of survival cards that are left in the deck can't be very many at this point in time. So, the guy that he's moving out into the vent there is going to be safe. He can eat food there, but it's not the spiciest of options. He makes a couple solid moves around here and there, just trying to kind of put himself into the first positions against, in that ocean there. He gets to have first position against crustaceans. He's trying to move himself into second place on that seamount on the right there because he's got an excess number of people on that seamount. That being said, I think that's kind of a mistake of a move because it looks like he's got 3 oranges there. So it looks like he's moving himself from second to third in one spot and then moving over to another spot to go from like 4th to 3rd. It's like not a very strong move, that one piece, but he just maybe doesn't have that many moves that he needs to do because he only has so many people on the board. So if that's all he has, then that's all he has. I think though what he should be doing is marching his folks out of that coral reef in the center. He's just way outnumbered. They need to be going somewhere else. I think that what he should have done was, instead of moving out of the seagrass, he should be moving the people from the coral reef onto the vent, or the coral reef onto my seagrass even. I think that's a little bit of a missed opportunity for him. Isaac's finally going to recall, which is going to do a reseed here. And at the stage of the game that we're at, this very well might be the last reseed of the game. That's really important, because when we see those tokens that are kind of come out for evolution, what's going to come out for abundance and speciation and all that stuff is going to just make it so that you know what the texture of the rest of the game might look like. And I think that it's a really good chance that it's the rest of the game, because Issac is sitting on 7 actions. So he really can go for quite a while before he's going to recall. And so we might have triggered the asteroid by the time he recalls next time. So just my experience with the tempo of the game, like how far we are along in both the deck and board development, like this might be the last reseed that we do. I don't actually remember. I could be wrong. Like this is just my sense of like what the flow of the game looks and feels like. And one thing that's nice for me is I just reclaimed into this reseed, so I can look and see sort of what options are there. I don't think any of us really considered this too much, and I could be wrong. Maybe I'm speaking for other players who we haven't discussed it, but there's a lot of different food in those autotroph actions. If we want to start starving out that one vent space that people are, I guess there's 2 vent spaces that people are actually eating food at, there's definitely a food that can be destroyed there. For speciation, again, it looks like we have a lot of plankton, which is nice for Issac. Well, it's not nice for me. I don't have any resource. I don't care about that at all. But it is unfortunate for Michael, who wanted to see a pink there really badly, or maybe even a mollusk, but definitely a pink, because then he could expand out of the pinks and steal from Edward. And Edward can't expand out of the pinks. He can't speciate out of the pinks because he doesn't have any cubes left. They're all in play. All right. I think what that is double kelp, seamount, seagrass, ocean. Huge flip for me. This is lucky and deeply inspiring. Double kelp is, there's 2 kelp spaces on the board. I control both of them. Seamounts, I control 2 of the 3 seamounts in play. I'm second place on the other one. Seagrass, I control 3 of the 4 seagrasses in play. And oceans, I control 2 of the 4 oceans that have players on them in play. I suddenly have all of the evolution options available to me, and I can just trigger events up and down the row. Love to see that. Obviously, this gives me like the setup that I've kind of done earlier in the game, and the fact that I don't have tokens on survival means that I'm contesting more things on the board than most other players. The exception is Edward, who also has kind of done the same thing with spreading out, but he's always dogged to someone else because of that tiebreaker rule. And Michael and I have both taken advantage of that on multiple instances. I go ahead and scoop a easy Wanderlust action here. There's a 2-fold action to this. One is, first of all, I score 3 points for my kelp, and I put those extra people up there on the left side, so I knew that was going to be the case. I can also jam up Michael now, who's only got 1 space there, so when I score kelp, I can be the only kelp scorer, and either he migrates out to the new space or he doesn't. He might just throw his free guy out there, but an extinction event is coming, I swear it. So, probably what he does is actually puts his free fellow out there. And hopes not to starve to death. But I think actually in this instance he just decides he doesn't want to move there, of course. So now you see why I kind of like move those folks at the plan of future expansion. And now you can only do land on on any Wanderlust action there. I also am now in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 plankton spaces. That's the other reason I did a Wanderlust action here. Those 8 plankton spaces let me do that 8 times 2 to like steal the domination token from Issac. I spend a lot of brainwaves this cycle thinking about where's Issac, because he's at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 times 3, like he could get to 18 right now. And I see that. I had actually briefly considered if I wanted to expand somewhere else with the hope of creating 2 additional tiles with that Wanderlust action so that I could actually be at 18 as well. But then I realized that if Issac just moved, I would be spending all this time doing these actions where he then is just going to like bounce me for it. And here you see Issac get immediately punished for that domination action with the yellow tokens. Michael's going to go ahead and grab it for 4 points because he's just he's on all 4 tiles with the yellow token that exists in play. So Isaac's choice to grab that earlier that I cast some doubt on is even worse, because then he basically wasted the action to get there and scores no points for it. And if he just reclaimed, I think he would have been in a better spot. It's a little bit unfortunate for him. And you see Edward, who has just kind of very quickly placed top to bottom. It's funny, he's playing a lot like I am in the sense of just like jamming those cylinders out there. But his goes top to bottom so quickly, even with his like flight ability, that he ends up reclaiming pretty early. The unfortunate thing about this for Edward with the reclaiming pretty early, and maybe it doesn't matter for all of us because Issac actually has 6 actions or whatever it is, or 5 that he's sitting on right now, is that, if this is indeed the loop in which we trigger the asteroid, Edward has no control over the end of the game. Like he has passed already. It's just completely up to the other players. And maybe it doesn't really matter because Issac just is in the driver's seat when it comes to that. But Michael's about to pass as well. And so if we trigger the asteroid really soon, this game is accelerating to an end very, very quickly. That's not what Issac wants to see. Issac needs more time in this game because he's behind on cubes, as we said before. He has the opportunity to put more into play, but he needs that time. And he's got a lot of endgame points, but he needs to score some extra to get there. And he has the infrastructure. It's just rolling a little bit slower. The more actions everyone, the white cylinders give him more options. And he needs the time to make that difference there. So him being in control there is good. But Michael also needs that time, right? He does not have a lot of endgame scoring himself. And I wonder if he's actually looking at, can he take a domination action? I'm sitting here thinking forever. What am I looking at? Probably not tectonics. So, this is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking forever about what I'm going to do with the evolution plan. I'm going to go ahead and score this kelp. As I've said, we're going to move myself and Michael forward as we are kelp buddies. And then this is what I think about forever is solar radiation. I see a track where I score on every single domination area. So I'm like, great, I'm going to keep scoring. I want to remove solar radiation from the play. It's going to hurt me a teeny bit, but really what it's going to do is just accelerate this game forward. And I'm not going to get solar irradiated because I just pointed out how I thought it was nasty if Edward had hit me with it a turn ago. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to bounce Michael, I'm going to bounce Edward, and you're going to see just all of a sudden the board and spaces get cleared up in places that I thought I was contesting. Here I have a funny choice because whoever I bounce is the player who's no longer in charge of the... No. That's the other thing, is Michael was in charge of survival, and I just tied him up with Issac. Brutal play. Remove all these people from the seagrass that I'm concerned about. So now I'm all of a sudden in all these locations by myself. Massive. The reason I spent so long thinking about this is because if you look on the top side of the board, you're going to notice that I take both of my people off of the oceans, which is unfortunate because oceans is the last spot. Having control over a tile for the 5th slot in evolution is a very big deal, because if we flip a huge deal card, say asteroid that might be coming up sometime soon, the person who's in charge of the ocean or in charge of a ocean or even just present and thriving in an ocean, because oceans don't score that many points, gets to do that. Huge deal. And I say, look, this is just too sweet. I'm now putting myself in a position where like kelp scoring is dope for me. Grass scoring is dope for me. No one else is scoring points. I need this to kind of make the difference. Flip a card here, and I can't even see what it is. I think it's this one. I think it's Omnivore. which is a survival card. I just cost Michael 10 points. He would have scored those 10 points. Wow, huge deal. Omnivore's pretty nasty card. You can pick an animal where a tile where your animal is, and you remove an element and an opponent from there. So it's a nice little attack card that you can use to remove folks' food as well as cubes from play. That's an example of one of those cards that's just better than taking the competition action and you're scoring because you're doing the evolution action. That's why these cards are just so impactful. Fun fact about Cladogenesis, right now it's completely useless. I originally had planned on taking Cladogenesis and scoring the mollusks thing, but I wanted to score from kelp to kelp right. I want to like walk all the way up that scoring track, and so jumping to Cladogenesis wasn't worth the extra card because I want to just use all of my discs to score over the next few rounds. Michael here has a white disc, so he can place anywhere. If he's consistent with this like goal of survival cards, he could do tectonics action, score 6 points, and then again he puts himself in the lead, because when you tectonics, you get to put one of your own pieces into play. But having flipped another survival card, there's even fewer survival cards left in the deck, right? Like it's less and less appealing to do that. So tectonics is an option. The classic Wanderlust recall is an option. He'd score a point for doing that, and I think that he could throw one of those land tiles over on the right side of the board where there's no food, and just decide if he wants to like send one of his double orange guys there to eat it and challenge me to run away from a place where I can't eat. I think that would be a pretty valid option for him. Again, extinction cards are coming up pretty soon though, so it's more about the fast recall than it is about anything else. We know that land tiles are not going to score in evolution. It's just that they're for endgame scoring right now, so they are a little bit so-so. He doesn't really need to move tiles. He could put more people into play for sure, particularly around where's he at with pinks? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, Edward did put a pink back into play after the reseed there. 5, 6. He could steal the pink cylinder from Edward right now. Edward's on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 himself. So Edward could just really steal it right back. So that's actually not so good. Michael would need to spread out a little bit more if he wants to steal that pink cylinder disc. So yeah, not so great. Scoring Seamount. I mean, he's a little low to give me 5 points and score himself 3, right? But he could do Cladogenesis. Solar radiation is garbage now, though. It's a 0 when it's from the discard pile, so it doesn't do anything. And then triggering disease is hardly worthwhile. It's only going to attack Isaac because it removes food elements from people that have more elements than you do. So it's fine for me or Edward, but it's for Michael and Isaac, it's just kind of more defensive than anything else. And as we've demonstrated, like you generally want the evolution cards to score you points, change the board state. The ones that have to do with like developing your adaptation stuff has not been as prevalent for folks. It's more about changing what the world looks like than anything else, and I think those are the more powerful cards. I suspect that Michael just looked at the discard thinking about the survival extinction thing that I've been mentioning and kind of what he can do there. He's in a very similar boat that I am, except for scoring is not looking favorable for him, and it's not looking favorable for him because he has fewer cubes in play than I do. And the cubes that he does have in play are, a handful of them are tied up in tectonics right now. It's insane to me that Isaac's reptiles have lived in the north there for so long. Not that they haven't done anything for him for a while, but pretty insane. He jumps down to Seagrass to score himself 4 points. I think that makes sense. I think he's probably going to take Habitat over Cladogenesis because those first 3 cards on the track they're not good to trigger. Cladogenesis can be, just not in this instance. Habitat's going to let him kind of mess with the board state a little bit. Like, who does he want to not eat food somewhere? I think the person he's still concerned about at this point in time are the crustaceans, and don't necessarily want to remove pink because he eats pink. But what he does is exactly that, because it is the nastiest spot for Edward. It's the one part that he really valued. And as we were just counting, Michael's trying to contest that. And as long as Edward has, those 3 spaces surrounded on the tile that he just removed, how is Michael going to steal his endgame points from him? So he removes that tile, and then he's going to put, I guess, a mollusk somewhere in play, which is great for him because he has people that need to eat on those vents there. He has people that need to eat, maybe just the vents. This is one of the cute rules of this game that I think Michael could and does not wind up exploiting. If this is indeed, if I'm correct, that we're not going to have another reseed event before the end of the game, right? We're going to asteroid, then recall, game over. He could put this snail up in the vent space, in the space that's surrounded by 3 vents, because the food goes away when you do a reseed event. But you don't do a reseed event after the asteroid is flipped. You just go to the end of the game. And so if he wants to do this like survival plan, he could have thrown some food up there, say, I'm immune to extinction, I'm going to keep on surviving, and I'm the only one who eats mollusks anyway. Instead, what he does is he throws out in the kelp because he sees me scoring an extra easy 14 points over there. That being said, it's not an exciting spot. How's he going to get over there, right? He's going to have to use a white cylinder to speciate out of it if he wants to, because there aren't any mollusk spaces there. So I think the thing that I just suggested is a little bit spicier, but it's a very niche rule. Spoiler alert, it'll come into play later. Isaac will do then exactly what essentially Michael was thinking he was going to do with those mollusks, which makes Michael's play a little bit sadder still. Although, for Michael, actually, he puts me from first to second now because of Isaac, and then I would go from second to third because Michael beats me on ties too. So it's actually not so true. It's not as bad for Michael, but it's just not as good for Michael. And he needs to, again, make points. Like, he's not just trying to beat me. He's trying to beat Brown. I like that play for Isaac. I mean, it sucks for me, but like, kelp is scoring, a lot of kelp scoring spaces. And to be honest with you, I don't hate seeing it. Like, yeah, I would rather he didn't. But if he starts taking the evolution action and I'm scoring a free 4 points for second place, that's pretty okay with me. Because again, like, I am concerned about Isaac. He's got another 30 points in reserve there. Like, he's got the same score that I do. But I think that he and I are like points on board losing right now. The setup though is really nice for me. I just have a lot of options. And then you see, this is what I'm talking about. Like, I get a lot of advantages for being in the position that I am right now, because Edward goes and scores a seamount. I'm second place. So yeah, he scores 5, I score 3. I'm a little sad to see the evolution track have filled up so much. Like, my plan was to like jump down to kelps and then I'm just going to like walk up the track. And 2 of the evolution spots have already been taken at this point. Cladogenesis here is the play for Edward. He's just going to undo what Habitat did, put that pink worm back into play. I don't think that the other 2 cards are even close to a contest. And then, disease there is going to make Michael and Isaac's lives a little bit harder. In fact, when he triggers disease, Michael is going to lose one of those 2 pink things, and all of a sudden Michael's dreams of messing with Edward's plans are ruined. I hate to see that because I wanted Michael to be able to steal Edward's endgame points. It seems like he's still in the lead at this point in time. And with Habitat, he's also going to get to, we know what he's going to place, but I think he also gets to remove something. Or did I make that up? Where'd you go, Habitat? Yeah, remove 1 element. So he can also attack somebody. I didn't see if he removed something. The question is like if he's like a vengeance player, right? I put it away. So what did I miss? Did he not remove something? Did I just miss it? Did it too fast? Let's see. Oh, I see. Okay. He removes the plankton from up north because Issac did the maybe I didn't notice him doing that. Issac did the cute play where he made his guys safe in the north. That again, like they would not be removed later and would score a bunch of points for him. So he's also respecting Isaac's position in the way that I did. That's really funny that I did not notice that he did that. This game moves surprisingly fast at times. Actually, Isaac's really fast at playing. He knows exactly what he's trying to accomplish in this game. This is a big deal also. Cloudogenesis triggers 2 cards off the board, shoves things down. The chance of an extinction event right now is higher than it has ever been before. I do think that attacking Issac is interesting here. I mean, he does have... Well, yeah, to be honest, all 3 of us are tied on points. Michael is actually ahead on points for me because I have basically no in-game scoring, and I'm 2 points ahead of Issac or something like that when you look at the in-game scoring. So yeah, actually, attacking Issac is not a bad call here. He's also, right, inherently attacks Michael and Issac. Isaac's not so concerned about losing that sun thing. It doesn't do anything for him. And then we finally flip the long-awaited... It's unfortunate because the disease just went into the discard pile, so people aren't losing victory points. Long-awaited death card. Terrestrial is a card that is really cool, actually. Lets you put 4 cubes into play and abruptly put some food into play, either on a vent or a land tile. It's the land tile part that's usually pretty good because lands are worth 8 points and you can just like abruptly be the person that is winning that spot. Now you need 4 species in your gene pool, or up to 4 species in your gene pool. And this is actually where that solar radiation is kind of nice for me because now I have 3 species in my gene pool. So I'm actually, and same with Edward, like terrestrial is actually pretty good. And you just see how the vent just friggin' collapses. It's definitely unfortunate that terrestrial token didn't come up earlier and just like knock out Edward's guys before he got that pink worm back out there. But yeah, man, board just evaporates in the south there. It's pretty gnarly. I don't see what that card is, but it's definitely not asteroid. It's something that looks like it's in the ocean. The asteroid is not. Carbon cycle? No. It's not volcanism, which is what it looks like. I think it's maybe the one that scores points for yellow sponges, yellow food in play. So pretty unexciting. Which really means the board is full of some pretty unexciting stuff there. I think that one in the middle there scores for vents. And now everybody's vents died. Yep, 1 VP for each species you have on vent tiles, and those are all gone. Weird spot here for me, right? Like I can score kelp to trigger a card, but it's 7 for Issac and 4 for me, and like kind of what I want him to do is score for himself. Like I said, it's unfortunate that mountain grass have been taken because those are the ones I really wanted to be scoring. Maybe these players are going to recall. Like I think Michael's going to recall soon. Actually, he has to recall in his next action, so that's my opportunity to grab grass. So if I want to make sure I do that, then I have to put a blue cylinder on kelp to make sure that I can grab grass as the next action. Or I have to use my white cylinder to sort of like do the delay thing. Because I kind of want Issac to score the kelp, because then he does the work and I score 4 points, and that's a little bit more appropriate. So the question is like, how much do I like triggering the omnivore card? Because I don't want adaptability. And I don't think that the omnivore, there's no player that I'm like looking to remove their food. You know, like Isaac's up there in the corner with me, but we eat the same food, unfortunately. And there's nowhere where I'm like super eager to knock out Edward's food. I mean, it could be that spot that he just placed. That would be probably what I'd target. That highly contested pink worm location is probably where that is it omnivore? Yeah, where that omnivore card would go. So that's a legit choice. But I could also just, score some points for tectonics, 6, I guess. Or I can Wanderlust, but then I have to take another action, so not so great. So what I end up doing is I say, you know what? Isaac just got slapped down a little bit. Yes, we are tied, but that's fine. Oh, of course, duh. Wow, how am I going to miss that? It's late, y'all. I had a lot of food. Okay, so I scored the Kelp Forest there. It's good for both the other players, both orange and purple, but I'll score the 7 anyway. And I'm sure I'm going to trigger the Omnivore card. The adaptability card basically does nothing for me. I don't want to swap I want that sun. It's like what's keeping me alive in a lot of places in the world. The best place to kill a brown. Can I kill not a brown? Yeah, so I could actually choose the spot where the 5 oranges are and kill one of the oranges, just because I'm maybe a little worried about Michael, and remove the food, because killing one of the brown tokens on that right tile, the whole goal is that they're gonna fucking go extinct, right? That's our goal of removing that pink worm food. So that is the motivation there. Now the pink worm food is not as interesting anymore because Michael is not gonna contest the domination action token, but it still does a fair amount of damage. Instead, what I say is, look, I'll go back to first place in Kelp Forest. As opposed to being focused on attacking Edward, I'm going to be focused on the thing that matters most. I do think the game is ending soon. I'm going to remove that Kelp Forest piece. It's plus 3 points for me. It moves me from 4 to 7. And I'm going to remove that mollusk because Michael's making me nervous by putting that into play. So I don't want him to speciate out of there with a white disc. He could speciate out of the blue, but then he's going to starve to death. So I'm going to make it so that it's just Isaac and me. This Kelp Forest is where I'm scoring a lot of points at the end of the game. I like that play a lot more. Good on me. And in case you didn't see it, we flipped Asteroid. Asteroid's a huge deal here. You see Michael scores a couple points because now he's on 2 tiles. He does have the most, but he only scores 3 points for it, which doesn't feel quite as insane as scoring 10 or even 15. And he passes now, and that heavy breath that you just saw from me, if you were just watching me there, is because I'm it's happening. The Asteroid is coming, baby. Someone is going to score this. Someone's got to score this. And Isaac is still holding on to a fair chunk of pawns. It is very, very reasonable that this game is over in 1, 2, 3, 4 turns, or fewer. And then Isaac ruins my life by speciating out of suns, which I think is a totally appropriate action. I mean, that's a 10-point play for him, and it sucks for me. It's minus 4 points for me. So hate to see that, but I also think it's totally the right call. It's tough to beat 10 points. He needs the cubes on the board anyway. And this is what's nice about reptiles. When you speciate, you're in charge all of a sudden. Edward can't score grass. I think the play for Edward is to control the Asteroid. He can score an ocean. It's 2 points for Michael and 1 point for him, but he has just seen us continue to catch up over the last couple turns. That's because of the crustacean, losing tiles and everything. And he needs this game to end soon. I mean, there's nothing he's got almost all of his pieces in play. There's nothing he is looking to do other than end the game. And there's not a lot of great spots for him to score points in. One option for him could be sort of trying to move up into the fence, but his people are just kind of in the middle of the board. So there's not a lot he can do there. So an option, and the one that he goes for here, is to spread his people all about. That being said, I don't know where they're going to go. Yeah, he has some excess people in places, but I really think just Ocean Asteroid would have been he wants to control what that asteroid looks like. He wants to control who he nukes, and he doesn't want to be the target as the person who's leading. Maybe he's just not worried that like Michael is going to jump all the way down there to do Evolution Ocean, and that's fair. But Michael has 2 white cylinders, so throwing an orange all the way at the bottom there is actually not necessarily terrible for Michael. He's the kind of person that's going to love to make use of that asteroid, He starts moving out of these seamounts that he has sort of like a weird number of people in. And Ray tries to get himself first, and that he has 4 people in that seamount up north. So he says, okay, I'll move one of them over here. And be first place instead of second place in this mount here for Nick, which is unfortunate but fine. And then, you see he's like looking about going into the seagrass here, but like there's not enough people. So instead he kind of moves into the coral reef. He concedes the open ocean space there, which is, again, like he has another ocean space that he can trigger, so he doesn't want to lose both of them. But, he's moving these folks out of here that they're admittedly not doing a ton because he's just in last place there, to come in and get, he gets first in the coral reef instead. But he's also setting up like the juiciest meteor spot of all time for Michael, right? It's 15 plus dead opponents for him to meteor that spot. So that's what I'd be concerned about in that move. And then he does what I think is wild, right? He moves out of the ocean completely. If he does that, he's ceded the ability to control that 5th slot, ceded the ability to take the asteroid if he wants to, which I just think is an oversight, assuming he follows through with this move. Now, admittedly, like moving extra people into that coral reef over there is not bad, right? Like he's trying to take control of spaces by a huge quantity of folks, because he has just been boxed out in 2nd place, 3rd place, 4th place, in all these places because he loses ties, right? Like playing crustaceans is tough. You really, really need to be in Edward's position really far in the lead. And even then, he can see that it's slowly slipping away from him. Yeah, I think moving 2 is correct. You want to be 5, 3, 3, 1. That's a better way than having 4 there, because I have a big pile of people right next to you. And, he'll pick 2 of those guys to move into the seagrass, which is fine. It blocks me out of the seagrass and puts him in 2nd place there. I mean, it's just a lot of work for him to do that. I'm glad that he keeps one of the guys in the ocean. And, right, he sort of concedes, like, okay, this moving into this central coral reef thing is not the right play for me. Instead, he'll end up moving people into the kelp forest, which is a very relevant space. You don't know when I'm going to reclaim, but even still, it's worth points. And it pushes, this is one of the things about spaces with multiple people in them. He pushes everybody down the chain. It's -3 for me to go to 2nd place. It's -2 for Michael. It's -2 for Isaac. So not only is that 7 points for him to move in that space, if everything stays that way at the end of the game, it's -3, -2, -2. So like he's scoring 9 points or 10 points relative to the other players. Moving into that kelp forest space is a much smarter call, I think, than trying to contest that coral reef where he was in 2nd place. Now, admittedly, he gives up 3 points to do it, so it's not as big a deal as I'm trying to make it out to be. I do like seeing that he did a move here. I still just think the asteroid would have been gnarlier. On the other hand, now that coral reef space, if it gets nuked, doesn't hurt Edward. So that's pretty cool. I'm bummed to see that. I mean, this series of actions just was not great for my seagrass situation where I was totally in control after the solar radiation. So I still think the right call is for me to score the seagrass here, 4 for me, 2 for purple. And then I have the choice of either scoring basically nothing or doing terrestrial, right? Because I don't have any people on vents, or I've got 2 people on vents. That's 2 points. And I guess I would score 3 points for being adjacent to the yellow food there. But terrestrial lets me put all my people into play and a food there. So that allows me to stop Michael from just continuing to do the survival thing, and then I can do the survival thing. I know survival at the end of the game, survival happens as like part of like a condition of the rules. This is a really bold play. I decide that I'm going to go ahead and take the juicy Wanderlust space, put some food there, and get my people out here. Now, this looks like it's a 1-point play, but my people on that Seamount are in second place. So what this really is a 9-point play. Who's going to contest me in this land here? Like, they're going to come out here and they're going to starve. Michael maybe throws a guy out there and then he starves. But I'm still first. And it's a 1 point for placing it and 8 points there. So I'm happy to take that. If someone wants to bump my Wanderlust tile, great. Like, you can do that because of adaptability in that first slot there. But then I get that white cylinder back, giving me another action. Seems good, Bob. Now, yeah, I still think the right play here is terrestrial. Because, 2 points for vents or 3 points for yellow. If I do have 5 folks in the vents and no one else decides to, Michael doesn't end up moving an army into the vents himself, then I'll have 2 locations and I'll score 3 points. So I've taken some points away from him. I've given them to myself, and done it in a way that I think is a little bit safer. The one thing I don't think that I'm thinking about in this moment, though, is that autotrophs action where folks can just remove essentially whatever food I put up there, which probably would be plankton. I don't see why it wouldn't be. I guess people can expand out of plankton, but speciation is not very popular right now. I think this is where I'm confirming the reseed event after the asteroid thing takes place. And I'll say right now, if I could trigger the asteroid, I absolutely would. This is where like the pain of having removed those people from the ocean is very salient. I for sure would have just scored those 2 points and triggered the asteroid. For sure, that's a bold claim. I think so. I think that I'm a very reasonable target for the asteroid, and so being able to not have my folks die, pretty good. But then again, I'm a cannibal, so they can eat my pieces and I'll score a couple points off of that. And you see in these past few turns that gap has closed further and further and further. Edward did a move which I think he needed to do. He had garbage for endgame scoring and now has put himself in a position where he has at least some endgame scoring in terms of board presence, because he's got 10 points on his pink white cylinder there. But he didn't score this turn, and everybody else is just making points. The other thing I thought with this terrestrial is it's nice to put these 3 cubes in the board. I'm never going to be speciating again for the rest of this game. And it's tough to say how much longer it is. My next action, unfortunately, is reclaiming because I'm out of cubes. And you'll notice here that I actually end up taking a green instead of a plankton because I think that it's maybe too good for Isaac, and also speciation is open for Isaac out of plankton. I've seen him do that in the past, right? So by putting the green out there, someone like Edward could go there, but Edward doesn't have any folks in the vents, so him taking a speciation out of that green space is very bad for him, and the other players just don't need it. So I go for the green there instead of the plankton because I just don't think it's going to be contested, whereas it could be contested by Isaac, and now I'm in charge of the survival card. I didn't see what that new card was. That's the one that gives you like half your dead cubes back. And we flip an extinction. No. Oh, when that comes into play, folks on every competition tile end up getting eaten. So a bunch of Seamount people and land folks are going to get eaten in this moment, which ends up being kind of a bummer for me and my plans, but also cleans up that land for anyone really contesting me. So this ends up hurting because I have to remove some single cubes on those seamounts that I hate to see, because seamount is one of the competition spaces. Fortunately for me, at least I get 1 point consolation for every person that dies. Yeah, you see me being confused here because I thought it was one seamount, one land, but it's one per seamount. So that's a pretty painful, that cost me 6 points right there, but 3 people die, so only cost me 3 points, I guess. And obviously everyone else loses a little bit too. Edward, I think, is the one who's kind of least impacted by that. Like, it looks like he removed a bunch of cubes, but they were cubes in places that he was over cubed, or where he was going to be starving anyway. Couple more points, baby. Let's go. Cannibal getting there. I gotta tell you, that Cannibal trait card, I severely underestimated it. And in one of my playtest games, not playtest games, I didn't playtest this game, but in one of my self-practice games, I was like, this is actually the real deal. Like, scoring upwards of 10 points in the game for just kind of playing and people not wanting to kill you. Pretty good. Pretty good. So we're back to Michael. Michael's so stressed. You can see he's just completely slowed down where he's at. You see how nervous I am here? This is one of those things where you actually could count everyone's scores, but it's super boring. And also it's going to change a lot. Right? Like, you can count board presence and score every one of the tiles. The fact that folks went so hard on the vents at the beginning of the game meant that they removed all the land tiles. Huge chunk of endgame scoring to be winning land tiles, and there just aren't any right now. So me sort of sitting in all those kelp forests, I'm a mixture of firsts and second places. Really nice. The coral reefs are kind of owned primarily by the crustaceans, but a little bit by me. Seamounts, actually, like, Edward's got a decent chunk of endgame scoring here too. And yeah, Issac, the purple guys blend into the board, and they're not all in the best spaces, but they add up. It adds up really quickly. Again, it just looks like Michael's like fewer on orange guys. I think it's because he hasn't taken many speciation actions. What did he take? He's doing exactly that. Yeah, speciation action here is a huge deal for him. That is 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I mean, first of all, he's down on cubes, and now he kind of is up back to everyone. It's 5, 10, plus 2, 12 points. That's a 12-point play for him. -4 for Edward, -2 for me, -1 for Issac. Great speciation action. You can see why he uses a white cylinder to do that. Issac takes a friggin' snap action again. He's so fast. What did he do? What did you do, Issac? He used the sun cylinder. Did he take an adaptation token? Oh, Issac. That's what Issac did. He went back up and he took an adaptation token for sun. I think that's a mistake. He's on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sun spaces. So he wants 8 times 3. This is 24. It's plus 9 points for him, but it's plus 9 points across 2 actions. I guess that's okay. I guess that's what he's doing. I can't help but wonder if putting on a move 5, if there were 5 moves that I think would have been stronger for Issac than the 9 points across 2 actions for taking the sun tile. Because, like, suppose he moves seagrass guy there. That's plus 4 points. The one in the bottom right, and then he kind of slides over to the orange area there. Oh, it's plus 2 points because he'd be second place. One of those guys in the seamount moves to another seamount. That's plus 2 points. He can move 2 people out of the sands there. He can win both of those coral reef. Those are plus 3 points. 3, 6, 8, 10. Move that person out of the kelp forest to be me. Yeah, I think Issac should have moved 5 people. I think that's how you take advantage as reptiles, is by speciating and moving. The play that he just made is the kind of play that I think is a little bit stronger if you are Edward or myself, who's bad at winning tiebreakers. All right, Edward goes ahead and scores the ocean, the plan that I suggested from last turn. I don't know if this, given the way he moved at first, I don't think this is what he was planning at the beginning of last turn, but maybe it was what he was planning by the middle, because he kills that pile of cubes right there in the center, and that is going to go ahead and remove all those points from other players. I think he does actually leave one person, so he's going to choose who he puts there, and now we're having the discussion of who's winning and who's losing. I don't think I even make an argument here. But I do jokingly say, like, hey, kill all my guys because they're cannibals. If you want to leave one, that's fine too. Obviously, whoever gets left behind, it's better for them. I think the right choice is to give it to Issac, because even though he's got the plus 30 points, he is still a little bit behind. Michael's got 2 low scoring end game. Yeah, I think it's Issac that you leave in the middle there. And then he's going to go around and remove 1 from each spot. No, he ends up choosing Michael. Sure, fair enough. They dump those in there, and you're going to see we actually go on the overhead camera because we didn't count how many points I had, and then there's sort of a discussion about whether it's 5 or 6. And fortunately, because they're recording the game, they go back and check it and find out that it's 6. So you'll see us go into person view in just a moment rather than overhead camera view as they go to check the playback. But before we do that, let's see if we can kind of make sense of what Edward's going to do in a circle. You know, he's going to knock out stuff that matters. So knock me down in the seagrass, maybe put me to second place, give me a point. That's fine. Doesn't have much impact in that seamount above it. In the ocean, he's obviously going to kill Michael. In the sands, he's going to kill Michael. In the kelp forest there, you know, he can decide whether he wants to hurt me, but also give me a point, or hurt Michael, but also give Issac some points. You know, he's got a kind of funny situation there. And then down into the vent tile there. I'm winning vents, so you maybe knock one of my guys down, but knocking 1 down doesn't really impact my scoring. I'm still most. So probably instead of giving me the point and not affecting me, you knock out Michael's piece in case Michael decides to get a little cheeky and spread out over the survival. I don't think it matters too much, to be honest. So he does exactly what I said in the ocean and the sands there. And then he's counting this, and he's like realizing that it doesn't matter much what he does in the seamount here. He ends up knocking out Issac because he maybe could move in at some point. Like, why not? And the seagrass here, you know, it's 4 versus 2 points, and get a point is only a cost of 1 point for me. But I'm more than happy to see him knock out Issac instead. And this is what I'm talking about cannibals being a mind control ability. And then did I see what he did in the vent? I think in the vent he did actually kill Michael's piece. The kelp forest, though, is one of curiosity. Time is getting really, really short. I literally think to myself, you know, Issac could just choose to end the game. I mean, he's not going to. He just took an adaptation tile, so for sure he's taking domination action. Otherwise, he just completely wasted that last action, which is obviously insane. You see in that kelp forest there, he knocked out Isaac's piece. I think that was a mistake. I think that he's a little bit overly concerned about those 30 endgame points. Also seeing that Isaac is like going up to score another 9 points, I guess, in his next turn is scaring him too. But Isaac, I think, is just too far behind. I think knocking out, well, again, for me, it was 1 fewer points thanks to Cannibal. So I think Michael would have been the person I would have hit in the kelp there. I don't think it matters. It doesn't, I mean, it might matter, but yeah, essentially who you're choosing is like knock down Nick for a point. Knock down, Isaac didn't even lose any points. Knock down, swap 2 of Michael's points for 2 of Isaac's points. It's very awkward because when you knock me down for a point, you also give Michael 2 points. So that's actually the worst proposition. I think killing me in the kelp forest would have been a mistake. That's Cannibals for you. I guess that's actually the same thinking in the seagrass, right? If you take away 2 from me, you give 2 to Isaac and give 1 to me. So really what you're doing is just generating points for your opponents. God, I love Cannibals. Yeah, and I lost the 6 points that I made in that coral reef and made 6 points. So like that asteroid didn't cost me anything. And usually asteroid is really nasty. If the person who's leading takes asteroid, that's often really nasty. And you see that those 6 points put me into the lead here. Let's see how stressed I am from standing. Let's go. All right, Michael, where are you at? You have gone to speciation, so you're going below that. He could Wanderlust for 3 points, either the land or the seamount. There is not food that he really cares about there. He could Tectonics, but he is not going to win Tectonics, so that's going to be 3 points or maybe 6 points if he does the Mega Tectonics, which I don't think feels very good. It's actually just good for me if he Tectonics one of my spaces, so that's not great. Migration, definitely a valid option for him. He's not going to score kelp. He could just score seagrass. Score seagrass is 4, and then take that card that says get points for every 8 points. That might be the play. Score seagrass and then score 3 off of that. What's this new card we got here? Is there anything that matters? We had a lot of the most dramatic cards, interestingly, at the beginning of the game here. Biodiversity. Gain 1 VP for each tile that your animals share with 1 or more opposing species. That's really good. Wait, did he just use a white token? What? What? Michael, what are you doing? Oh no. I don't know why he uses a white cylinder. Maybe he thinks he can't be bumped, even though adaptability is in play. And then he takes a thing to take half of his cubes back. I guess because he's thinking of Wonderful. I think he's thinking this game is going to go on longer than it is. Or praying that it's going to go on longer than it is. Because we're a turn away. Yeah, this is just, I think, a missed 4 points. Also, I think if he was going to use his white disc, he really should have considered, instead of scoring 4 for the Screegrass, scoring 2 for the Open Ocean and scoring this Biodiversity card. 1 point for each tile that you share. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, it's only 5 points for him. Usually for people, biodiversity is a pretty big deal. Yeah, maybe he's nervous that I'm going to score biodiversity or something like that. That's why he put the white disc there. But yeah, he must have. If that's what he did, he missed the thing. We see Isaac do the domination going up to, is it 21? Is it only 7? Oh, because the asteroid knocked him out of a space. They knocked him out of that coral reef. Uh-huh. Sure. So only, that's a bummer. That means that this 9-point play turned into a 6-point play across 2 actions. Yeah, even worse. I think migration would have been better for him. Because if he did migration and then he did kelp domination, I would have scored 4, but he would have done his migration plus 7 points rather than 6 points for 2 actions there. Even if I'm the target, I still think that's the right call, because if you score the second kelp, he could take the extremophiles and score 2 points for that. Yeah, I think that's a missed opportunity. And then Edward, looks like he put food into play. Is that what he did? Oh, he took an adaptation from mollusks. Why did you do that, Edward? Where is he worried about dying? He's worried about dying on that kelp forest that he ran into. I see. So he has to take that action. I don't think I realized that when he moved there. Did we remove something? Okay. Now that I'm seeing it, I think that he moved into that kelp forest with this plan, with that asteroid plan, because he wanted to nuke the coral reef. And I think it didn't do as much as he wanted it to do. I think if Edward had just asteroided 2 turns ago instead of moving and then moving after that, it might have been better for him. Again, because adaptability is in play, you're not worried about someone taking the infinite move and you not being able to take it. Unless you're worried that someone's going to take adaptability, but that's just a bad place for a player to be in. And I get to take another turn here because I ended up recalling last turn. And I think I just jumped straight down to kelp, right? Score 7 points there and a couple points for Isaac. I can use my white disc to bounce Michael's white disc. Score that biodiversity. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12 points. That's pretty good. I think there's 2 more turns though, right? Because I think Isaac's gonna do the there's this turn. This might be my last turn, because Isaac could Wanderlust, reclaim, end game, score 3 points, and then just end the game. Yeah. So I need to leave myself an option for next round. Yeah, I need to leave myself an option for next round. And so I do that by going on Wanderlust here. I'm just saying, hey, I like these land tiles. These are worth points. And again, there's a green food there, which only Edward and I can use, and his pieces are nowhere near that side of the world. So I'm going to run out of the seagrass here, which is an upgrade from 2 points because I got bumped to second place, to 8 points because neither Michael or Isaac are going to be able to eat when we go there. So that is a 6-7 point play for me. And you notice that I didn't put that land next to the other land because I didn't want anyone else to come in there, right? I don't want Edward to come in there and be able to eat the food, so I can't put it near any browns. So 7 points right there, and I get to take another action. I get to see another tile, right? Like I could place another land tile right now. That's 3 points. Or no, I can't, because I can't Wanderlust. I could Tectonics for 3 points anywhere, right? That's always fine, but probably I just go down to kelp. Instead, what I do is migrate, which makes a lot of sense. I've got a lot of useless people in a seamount in the middle of the board there, and that's about all I'm going to be moving, I imagine. Yep. I think people severely underestimate how powerful moving is at the end of this game. When you see that it's coming, like, you need to get somewhere else. And then, yeah, the trouble can be that you move somewhere and then people move after you to kind of make your life a little bit harder. But they have fewer options, or they have to bump your disc to do so. And, like, for instance, because adaptability is in play, like, if you're using a white disc, aren't you going to bump the infinite one? If you're not using a white disc or a white cylinder, then you only have 3 moves, and 3 moves is, like, not so great. 5 is significantly different from 3, I'll say. I mean, it sounds dumb to say, but it does really make a big difference. 2 moves is, like, really rough. And you can see, I mean, moving is just not as exciting as speciating, but if you don't have cubes to play, then so be it, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and get some freebie points down there in the seamount, and then I do this, like, very aggressive expansion out for those survival points at the end of the game at the top. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 moves. And maybe I move a guy out of that grass there. Oh no, I move my useless seagrass guy into another seagrass for 2 points. So yeah, that's a big move for me. I mean, I just bumped myself from 2 spaces to 4, so that's 6, 7, 8 on the vents, because 1 for each of the vents as well, plus 2, 4, 6 in other places, so that's 14, plus the actual Wanderlust action, 21. Yeah, I just scored 21 points that turn. Not bad, Bob. Yeah, that's a huge score. And Michael could here take autotrophs and just remove my green food. And I don't think that I saw that play when this came down to it. It certainly would be a pretty gnarly action. It would cost me 1, 2, 3 plus 10. It would cost me 13 points if he did that. Maybe I did see it, because the thing is, it would cost me 13 points, but it would give Michael 0. So if he's not sure who he's competing against, which I think it's a hard board state to ascertain, then he's got to do something else. So he does this play, which is plus 4 points for him. Right, keeping that guy alive on the land there is plus 4 points for him. So it's -9 over me, right? Rather than killing 13 of me, he's scoring plus 4 points, but it's plus 4 points over the other players. So if you're not sure, that's the safer play. And that's one of the things that's I think the opacity of scoring in this game is a very big deal. He bounces me on Wanderlust, which I'm like, yay, I have my white cylinder back, but that immediately tells me the game is over. And then Issac basically says, I like what you're doing with those land tiles. I'm going to do the same kind of thing. And he places it in a spot where only he and I can contest. There's no food to go there, and he needs it to be somewhere where he can eat. So it needs to be somewhere that touches plankton or touches suns or yellows, which are just not really on the edge of the board. So he places it in the only place he can. And he gives up 3 points to gain 8 points. Right, moving from the kelp there into the land. So plus 5, plus 1, 6 points. Of course, I'm going to move now and kind of mess that up a little bit. But it's like plus 5-ish points for Issac. But it's also plus points for me. I love seeing this as the last play here. I do think it's the right play for him. Ending the game is appropriate. You know, everyone else having another action is quite good, right? Like for me, it's score kelp. Like I left myself that option. That's why I didn't move on my last turn, even though obviously it ended up being a better spot. But it was like, oh great, now I can score kelps. Michael with another action would get to move or to, you know, like there's just a lot of options of things that he could do with that. Edward, I think, with another action actually doesn't have a lot of options because he is sort of... Yeah, actually, Edward's pretty happy, I think, to see the end of the game. Maybe he does domination. 2, 3, 4. No, because he's not really around those places. Yeah, so now we're going through and scoring the end of the game. And I know the end of this game is that I win. So I could tell you that right now, right? We're at the end. And I think at this point in time, I was feeling like it was going to be me. In those last couple rounds, I just eked out more points than other players. They were taking 5, 6 point actions, and I was taking, the last action I took was 21 points. And Edward, while having moved, previously to gain points, had then Michael come in and speciate after him and me come and then move after him. And a lot of the points that he gained ended up getting pushed away. And they would have been even more pushed away had Issac taken the move 5 like I suggested. And it was obviously very nice for me that the move 5 was still there at the end of the game to do exactly what I did. The fact, too, that taking autotrophs to remove my food for terrestrial, now that I'm talking about it, I actually do remember thinking about it. It's tough to be the player who scores nothing. All you're doing is attacking one player. You have to know for a fact that player is the one that you need to beat in order to make that the right play. And I don't think that it's super clear when you look at this board that I'm the one that's going to win by that. But the thing is that I'm sitting on lands, and you see me, I'm scoring points there, right? Like, we've scored the richest part of the board already, but that's survival plus the land plus the kelp plus the kelp plus the land plus the land. It adds up real fast. And I got lucky, certainly, with the evolution tiles flipping out in the way that they did, right? That their kelp, mount, seagrass, oceans were like all pretty good for me. Oceans ended up being pretty good for me, but then like popping off that solar radiation, making that rush, everybody was scoring a lot more points at the end of the game, but making that rush with scoring and expanding outwards, also kind of like moving towards the end of the game, and then being able to take advantage of the cubes that I did have on board, and any cubes that ended up getting removed from like the asteroid and things like that, immediate rebate on points thanks to Cannibal. It's at this point of scoring, like it's at the point where I passed the 20 mark where I was like, oh, it's me. Because after we score all the places on the board, the only thing we have left to score are the cylinder bonus points, which Issac just isn't close enough because he's the one that's going to get a crazy amount of points to make the difference. Yeah. Super exciting realization, right? It was in the middle of scoring this where I was like, I'm gone. I've got it. And we're going to go to the end here, kind of see what the final scores are, because I want to talk about them, even though the movement's kind of spoiled there. But yeah, I think there's a couple things. Like I said, the evolution scoring going in my favor at the end of the game, allowing me a lot of options and levity of like what to do there, was great. I ended up actually being more blocked by other players than I had thought based on the evolution scoring, which like good for them that they were prioritizing scoring those seamounts and grass spaces. Issac obviously like got in my way a lot, moving into the seagrass lands and then moving into the kelp forest. Like, he was making a lot of moves to get in my way. Michael was trying to get into Edward's way, and they kind of slowed each other down a little bit because Edward needed to go on defense, and Michael unfortunately wasn't able to kind of steal out that space, steal out the pink tile from Edward, but he was able to kind of take over those seamounts after a while. And it just couldn't quite get there. I'm being very, very happy with that terrestrial play because I thought it was going to score me 3 points. And at the end of the day, it scored me, or 4 points, I guess, because of the ventile. And at the end of the day, it scored me like upwards of 13 points to do that. So obviously a lot better than scoring 3 or 4 that I would have. Not that it ends up really mattering. And when you do the end of the scoring here, like if someone had in fact taken that autotrophs action and scored me the minus 13, I would go from 50 to 150 there down to 137, which makes it a much closer game, but I still end up winning the game. And that is what you have. So fascinatingly enough, Michael ends up coming in second, which I think honestly, like, he just did a lot of work from where he started at the beginning of the game. Obviously, he gave himself the opportunity to completely knock a player out of the game, and it didn't end up paying off. And part of it was because I think he just was reeling a little bit from the mistake that he made at the beginning, but he really put himself in positions to take advantage of camouflage, to take advantage of like getting a little bit luckier with the card scoring, and then just a lot of opportunistic building out on the board that wanted to happen. Edward was so laser focused on scoring, it really put him in the position where everyone needed to beat him down. I think I've mentioned this before, but I'll reiterate it. This is the kind of game where there's enough beatdown that being in first is tough. And we saw that play out in this game. Like Edward was in first and we started moving to box him out. I mean, part of it is just naturally people are going to do that, and crustaceans always lose on ties. But when you're ahead like that, folks want to be removing your elements. They want to be attacking your tiles. Isaac saw some really nice opportunities to steal some points from me and everything like that, but it just wasn't enough. He didn't have enough kind of like middle of the game scoring to make it all work. And so as it was, I kind of ended up coming out on top. I think the points look a little bit more dramatic or a little bit larger of a gap from that end game scoring than I think that game was. I really do think up until essentially the last reseed that, I think at the beginning of the game, I felt like I was really in charge until I thought that I was, had just basically allowed myself to get completely murdered, which is no one's fault but my own, and super nasty of Michael, but a really clever play on his part. And then being able to sort of like take that, have my huge army of people on the board, and then start scoring points off of that, trying to catch Edward in the middle of the game, who was just doing a wonderful job of scoring points all game long, and then kind of like keeping that going. But in that last reseed, when I saw things slip out, I was like, okay, I have a very real chance here. I can close the gap, continue to close that gap. We put pressure on Edward to do so. I had already had points stolen from me, right, by other players, and there was a limitation on how much they could hurt me at this point because of the cannibal card that sort of created an additional barrier there, that really made a huge difference. And kind of just rounding the corner, essentially, like every little thing adds up. And I think by the end of that game, I was really tuned in to like scoring extra points and moving into different places. Like when you scored the points on the board, like I was at the top of the track, right? I was at the top of the players when we went into end game scoring, and then I widened the distance, even with fewer domination points than every other player, which meant that I scored just a crazy amount of points on the board. And I think that's something that's really easy to forget, and something that it's going to be about half your score. And that's exactly what happened, right? I had 150 some at the end of the game, and I had like almost 90 going into final scoring. So I didn't quite double my score, but got really, really close to it. So just don't underestimate what that end game scoring looks like. Really fun journey for me to walk back through this. I hope that it was enjoyable for you, and it was easy enough to follow along. I tried my best to keep up, and it was honestly really surprising how quickly some of the actions took place in the game and how other ones look slower. So it was definitely a bit of a journey to do, but thanks for watching, and I'll be around soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye.